My brother lied to Child Protective Services (CPS) about the harrowing reality of our home situation, effectively ensuring my parents could continue their relentless cycle of abuse against me. In that moment of profound betrayal, I snapped. I went absolutely nuclear, severing all ties and never once looking back. 5 excruciating years later, the phone rang, and it was him calling me in floods of tears, claiming, with a heartbreaking irony, that I was the only family he had left. Growing up, our parents meticulously drilled it into us that the very concept of privacy was inherently evil, a sin to be purged. They propagated this insidious idea that anything hidden was automatically something shameful, something to be punished. Literally, my mom would creep into our rooms while we slept, a phantom presence rifling through our belongings. If she discovered even a single piece of homework I hadn't explicitly shown her, or a forgotten drawing, she wouldn't hesitate. She'd wake me abruptly from my deepest sleep, dragging me out of bed to kneel on uncooked rice until the first rays of morning light, sometimes even longer. The sharp, unyielding grains would dig mercilessly into my skin, leaving tiny crater-like indentations that would throb and ache for hours afterward. Often, the relentless pressure would cause my knees to bleed, small crimson dots starkly marring the pristine white of the rice. The pain wasn't just dull, it was a sharp, constant agony impossible to escape no matter how I tried to shift my weight or redistribute the pressure. Each movement sent fresh waves of searing discomfort through my young body. But my dad was, if anything, even worse. He was the architect of our suffering, the one who meticulously crafted the rules that governed our every breath. He decreed the exact duration of our kneeling punishments, whether we were permitted the simple dignity of locking the bathroom door. And even the types of clothes we were allowed to wear ostensibly so he could visually inspect the work he did on us if we dared to break his draconian mandates. His face, when consumed by anger, would transform into a chilling shade of crimson, veins throbbing visibly in his forehead as his shouts tore through the suffocating silence of the house. The acrid, cloying scent of his aftershave would forcefully invade my nostrils as he leaned in close, his voice a guttural roar, making my stomach clench and churn with visceral anxiety. What unspeakable terror would unfold this time? I harbored an absolute, consuming hatred for both of them, and for every single one of their oppressive rules. Naturally, I tried to rebel in whatever small, desperate ways I could find. I'd clandestinely stash tiny, forbidden treasures under my mattress, crumpled notes from friends, a bright candy wrapper, a smooth pebble, anything, truly anything, that could be just mine. A secret sanctuary from their prying eyes. In the deceptive safety of the bathroom mirror, I'd whisper to myself, practicing the almost foreign sensation of having thoughts that belonged solely and unequivocally to me. The unyielding, constant surveillance made me feel like I was perpetually suffocating, as if there simply wasn't enough air in the entire house for me to breathe freely, to exist independently. My brother, however, was a different story entirely. He was fully and frighteningly indoctrinated, a zealous disciple of our parents' authoritarian regime. He followed their every word, every command, with an almost religious fervor. And not content with his own subservience, he was also dead set on ensuring I adhered to the rules with the same zealous obedience. His room was positioned directly across from mine, and I could often hear him moving about at night. The faint rustle suggesting he was probably meticulously organizing his perfectly displayed belongings, items he never had any reason or desire to hide. If he ever accidentally glimpsed one of my forbidden texts, he wouldn't hesitate. He'd bolt straight to our parents, eager to tell on me about how I was keeping secrets. Then, he'd stand there, watching with an unmistakable smirk plastered across his face as my parents laid hands on me. The raw satisfaction in his eyes was chillingly evident, as if he derived some perverse thrill, some twisted pleasure, from my suffering. He was also deeply self-serving and ruthlessly selfish, volunteering random, theatrical confessions at dinner, basking in the parents' praise and acting as if he occupied some moral high ground. I got so frustrated with my math homework today and honestly thought about giving up. He'd announce proudly, his voice oozing faux humility, as if admitting to some terrible, profound sin. The hardwood dining chair would creak ominously beneath me as I shifted, profoundly uncomfortable, dreading what I knew was inevitably coming next. Our parents would laud him endlessly for his openness and honesty, praising him profusely for daring to share his inner struggles. And over time, I guess his performance paid off handsomely for him. Gradually, insidiously, my parents started allowing him privileges they had never, ever extended to me. All of a sudden, his curfew was magically pushed back by a few precious hours. His room, once subjected to daily invasive searches, was now mysteriously left untouched. He'd strut around the house with this newfound, obnoxious confidence, shooting me knowing, condescending looks whenever our parents weren't watching, a silent affirmation of his elevated status. But me, oh, the intensity of the mistreatment against me only ramped up, escalating to unbearable levels. If I came home from school and failed to recount every single detail of every single class within the first few minutes, I would be punished, and severely. The chilling sound of my dad's belt sliding through the loops of his pants became the most terrifying, gut-wrenching noise in my entire world, a prelude to unimaginable pain. Often, I'd wince visibly in pain in class when simply sitting down, forced to concoct elaborate lies for my teachers about the mysterious reasons for my hurting. I fell during soccer practice, I'd murmur, my voice thin and reedy, or I'd bump into the corner of a table really hard, the harsh. Fluorescent classroom lights seemed to mercilessly highlight my discomfort, making me feel starkly exposed and vulnerable, even when I was certain no one was truly looking at me. And then, as if things couldn't possibly get any worse, they did. My parents, in a final, devastating blow, started allowing my brother to search my stuff too, and he absolutely reveled in it. The way his fingers would rifle through my few meager belongings was quick, invasive, and utterly violating, turning everything upside down with a cruel disregard. I caught him grinning, a wide, malevolent smile, while casually tossing out my possessions on multiple occasions, justifying his actions with the flimsy excuse, I never told them about this or that. You know, the jarring sound of my drawers being yanked open with violent force would sometimes jar me awake, and I'd lie perfectly, rigidly still, pretending to be deep in sleep while he ransacked my few precious possessions, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Other times, he'd feel particularly cruel, deciding to simply fabricate a lie about a secret note he'd supposedly found, or some other imaginary transgression. The rough carpet fibers would scratch against my tear-streaked face as I pressed my cheek to the cold floor, begging them, pleading with every fiber of my being to believe me. To believe there was no such note, no hidden secret. When that happened, after the agonizing wailings and the relentless accusations, my parents would lock me out of my own room, forcing me to sleep on the cold, uncomfortable couch. The worn leather couch was always cold and faintly sticky against my skin, and the single, thin blanket they grudgingly allowed me provided scant comfort against the pervasive chill of the living room, leaving me exposed and vulnerable. I'd often see my brother lingering in the dimly lit hallway after my punishments, his smirk a predatory gleam, like he was the undisputed king of the house, lording over his defeated subject. Sometimes, he'd even whisper things as he passed by, little insidious comments meant only for my ears, designed to twist the knife deeper. That's what happens to liars, he'd hiss, his voice a venomous whisper. Or you deserve worse. The hallway was perpetually bathed in a dim, eerie light, casting long, grotesque shadows that seemed to reach for me like grasping, skeletal fingers. What's truly heartbreaking about all of this is the devastating, unshakable realization that it didn't matter what I did, how hard I tried, how perfectly I behaved. My efforts were futile, utterly meaningless. I tried desperately to earn straight A's in school, my backpack perpetually heavy with textbooks as I studied late into the night, my eyes burning with exhaustion, my brain aching from the relentless pressure. I'd clean the entire house meticulously, every single weekend, scrubbing until my fingers were raw and bleeding. The acrid smell of cleaning products clinging stubbornly to my hands for days afterward. I'd even offer to cook dinner for them, carefully measuring ingredients, diligently following recipes to the letter, hoping against hope that some act of service, some show of obedience, would finally earn me a moment of peace, a glimmer of their approval. Precisely, a paralyzing fear of committing even the slightest misstep gripped me constantly. Yet, if I failed to lay bare every minuscule detail of my existence, my thoughts, my day, my very essence before them, their gazes would instantly harden, conveying a profound disappointment that made me feel utterly diminished, as if my inherent worth had plummeted. That particular disappointment, a silent judgment reflected in their cold, unforgiving eyes, pierced my spirit far more profoundly than any physical punishment they might have inflicted. It was a wound that festered, leaving a scar on my soul, unlike a bruise that would eventually fade. Over time, their disapproval escalated, morphing into a cruel form of psychological warfare, the chilling silent treatment. It was an invisible wall erected deliberately that suffocated me. I recall vividly those evenings when they would gather around the dinner table, a seemingly normal family tableau, their voices weaving a tapestry of conversation and laughter, while I was relegated to the cold, unforgiving kitchen counter, a solitary sentinel in my own home. Was I truly part of this family, or merely an inconvenient ghost haunting their domestic bliss? The mundane clinking of their forks against ceramic plates, the murmur of their casual conversation, interspersed with bursts of shared laughter, did not sound comforting. Instead, they resonated like a tangible, impenetrable barrier meticulously constructed between their world and my isolated one. Each scrape, each chuckle, was a brick in that wall, solidifying my exclusion. The kitchen counter, a stark, unyielding slab of laminate, felt frigid beneath my fingertips, mirroring the chill that had settled deep within me. And my food sustenance I desperately needed transformed into a bland, tasteless paste. Each bite a hollow echo of the emptiness that filled my stomach and my heart as I ate in such profound isolation. How could anything truly nourish when my soul was starving for connection? Just a mere few feet separated me from this carefully orchestrated illusion of a normal, happy family, a tableau so tantalizingly close, yet utterly unreachable. One particularly bleak night, following an especially harsh and unjust punishment from my parents, a memory still shrouded in a haze of pain and humiliation, I found myself plunged into an abyssal low. The world seemed to lose its color, its vibrancy, leaving behind only shades of gray. Every muscle in my young body ached with a dull, persistent throb, a tangible reminder of their cruelty. And the loneliness, a crushing, suffocating entity, felt like an actual physical weight bearing down on my chest, pressing the very air from my lungs until I felt utterly flattened, insignificant. The house itself seemed to hold its breath, hushed save for the relentless, rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the distant hallway, each second amplifying my despair, and the occasional, mournful creak of settling floorboards, sounds that only served to underline my profound solitude. It was within this suffocating silence, this cavern of despair, that I made what would become the gravest misjudgment of my entire life. In a moment of profound vulnerability, a desperate yearning for human connection, I foolishly convinced myself that I could confide in my brother, that he, of all people, might offer a semblance of understanding. I was utterly desperate for an ally, a single sympathetic ear, someone to share the unbearable burden I carried. So, in a hushed, trembling torrent of words, I laid bare the raw, lacerating pain I felt, hoping for empathy, for salvation. As we stood together in the shadowy hallway, bathed only in the faint spill of moonlight, the words, heavy with unspoken anguish, tumbled from my lips in a barely audible whisper, my voice cracking, fragile with the weight of overwhelming emotion. It was a desperate plea, an unburdening of a soul in torment. For a fleeting moment, I saw a subtle shift in his expression, a softening of his features that sparked a tiny, almost imperceptible flicker of hope within me. Could this be it? Could I finally be seen, truly seen, by someone? That fleeting hope, however, was brutally extinguished. Less than an hour later, the chilling reality of my mistake became devastatingly clear. I found myself positioned, face down across my father's rigid lap, the ominous metallic click of his belt buckle echoing in the suffocating silence as he began to unfasten it. His intentions painfully obvious. I remember instinctively clenching a pillow between my teeth, biting down with desperate force, not just to muffle the inevitable screams that threatened to tear from my throat, but also to physically anchor myself against the impending torment. The coarse fabric, damp with the ghost of previous tears, tasted of dust and the bitter tang of dried salt, a grim reminder of countless past sufferings. Each agonizing strike was punctuated by his slow, deliberate count, a sadistic cadence that dragged out the torture, from 1 to 2, all the way to 10, each number a hammer blow to my fragile psyche. With every brutal descent, each sickening thwack of the leather against my skin a sound that still haunts my nightmares, searing shockwaves of pain ripped through my entire body, leaving me gasping. Trembling, utterly broken, I remember that being my breaking point. It was the moment when the last vestiges of my childhood innocence, and perhaps my sanity, finally shattered. For so long, I had clung to the naive belief that my brother was merely a frightened accomplice, complying with our parents' demands out of pure, instinctual fear, just as I often did. But the stark, horrifying truth that night revealed was far more insidious. He wasn't just afraid. He genuinely, wholeheartedly believed in their warped ideology, their cruel justifications, absorbing every toxic lesson they meticulously instilled in us. He was a true believer, not a victim. I can honestly say, with absolute certainty, that I have never, before or since, experienced a more profound, soul-crushing despair than I did in the suffocating aftermath of that brutal revelation. The searing wound of his betrayal, the agonizing realization that the one person I had desperately hoped would stand with me had instead become an instrument of my torment, cut infinitely deeper than any physical pain could ever hope to inflict. Physical pain eventually subsides, betrayal leaves an indelible scar on the very fabric of one's being. In the desolate wake of that night, something inside me simply gave up. I stopped fighting, not with a bang, but with a weary, defeated sigh. The internal struggle, the defiant spark, simply flickered out. My precious journals, the last sacred repository of my true thoughts and forbidden feelings, were ruthlessly discarded. It was an act of self-erasure, a desperate attempt to sever ties with the me I was no longer allowed to be. Each page, once a vibrant tapestry woven with my innermost thoughts, my fears, my dreams, disappeared into the cold maw of the trash can, and with them, it felt as though irreplaceable fragments of my very soul were being ripped away, leaving a gaping void. I systematically purged my phone of all old texts, deleting any trace of a connection to a life I once knew, and from that point on, I never messaged anyone unless absolutely compelled to, maintaining a chilling, self-imposed digital silence. The illuminated screen of my phone, once a window to connection, became as barren and desolate as the aching emptiness that now resided deep within my chest. A stark visual representation of my internal state. When confronted, when coerced into one of their ritualistic confessions, I learned to simply fabricate narratives, spinning plausible but utterly false tales of minor transgressions. The truth, after all, was too dangerous, too painful. I'd recite innocuous fictions. I considered cheating on a math test. I'd drone. Or I told a small fib about completing my history homework. These were petty, easily dismissed infractions, designed solely to appease their insatiable hunger for control. The words, utterly hollow and devoid of any genuine emotion, felt like dry leaves rustling on my tongue, but they served their purpose, seemingly satiating my parents' relentless, suffocating need for absolute dominion over every facet of my being. Yet, amidst the ashes of my former self, a tiny, almost imperceptible ember of resilience still flickered deep within me. This was a tiny, tenacious flame, fiercely guarding the last bastion of me, fiercely rejecting the notion of complete annihilation. In secret, like a furtive act of rebellion, I began to reclaim a sliver of my identity by writing minuscule notes to myself, scribbled on discarded scraps of paper. These precious tokens of self-preservation were then hidden away, carefully tucked into the worn lining of my mattress, or stealthily taped beneath the dusty drawer of my desk, far from prying eyes. They were simple, poignant reminders that I was still me, that my essence, my true self, still existed, vibrant and defiant, beyond the suffocating confines of their tyrannical control. Messages like "stay strong," or "this won't last forever," or the most vital of all, "remember who you are," became my secret mantras, whispered on paper, a lifeline in a sea of despair. The clandestine act of writing these tiny affirmations, these whispers of hope, felt like the first desperate, life-giving gasp of air after being held underwater for an agonizing eternity of profound, almost spiritual release. But alas, in a world where my every move was under scrutiny, where privacy was a forgotten concept, it was only a matter of time before this fragile act of self-preservation would inevitably Cruelly, come back to haunt me. My ever-vigilant brother, my erstwhile betrayer, caught me in the act, pen poised over paper, my last remaining private sanctuary exposed. Without a moment's hesitation, a flicker of remorse, he immediately bolted, sprinting down the hallway, a harbinger of doom, straight to our parents. Each heavy thud of his feet reverberated through the quiet house, an accelerating, relentless countdown to the inevitable, brutal punishment that awaited me. As I had morbidly anticipated, their reaction was nothing short of explosive. They absolutely, utterly lost it, their self-righteous fury igniting the air around them. My mother's shrill voice, piercing and indignant, ratcheted up to a shrill, ear-splitting crescendo, declaring, "We are done with you." Each syllable, sharp as a broken shard of glass, made my ears ring, vibrating with the force of her unadulterated rage. And then, with a chilling inevitability, my father retrieved the belt again. That familiar, ominous, slithering sound as the leather was pulled from his pants sent a fresh wave of ice-cold dread through me, a sound that, to this day, can make my stomach clench with fear. My battered flip phone, my last tenuous connection to the outside world, was violently smashed against the wall, its demise a poignant symbol of their complete victory in isolating me. The cheap plastic casing cracked and splintered, scattering across the floor in a multitude of tiny, glittering shards, each fragment a testament to another piece of my world being broken. The punishment continued beyond the physical. I was condemned to 3 torturous days without food, a cruel deprivation that slowly gnawed at my strength. My stomach cramped violently, a constant, agonizing growl echoing the emptiness within, each pang a relentless, undeniable reminder of their relentless grip. Their desire to control even my most basic needs. In the desolate aftermath of that particularly brutal episode, their surveillance intensified to an unbearable degree. They began to stalk my every movement, shadow my every step, ensuring I was never, not for a single moment, truly alone. Solitude, for them, was a dangerous breeding ground for defiance. The incessant rhythm of their footsteps directly behind me, the palpable, suffocating sensation of their watchful eyes scrutinizing my every breath, my every twitch, drove me to the brink of madness. It was psychological torment, an unbearable intrusion into my very being. As if their constant presence wasn't enough, they instituted a horrifying new ritual. 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, and evening, I was forced to stand in the sterile expanse of the living room, performing a macabre charade of confessing secrets. I'd stand there, on the rough, scratchy carpet, my legs trembling uncontrollably from sheer exhaustion and emotional strain, meticulously reciting a litany of fabricated transgressions, while they, my judges and tormentors, reclined imperiously on the plush couch, their faces impassive, their eyes sharp with unwavering judgment. It was a theatrical performance designed for their pleasure, and my humiliation. And with every single agonizing session, my brother would be there, a silent, menacing presence, a cruel smirk plastered across his face, radiating a perverse pride as if he were performing some noble, righteous duty. He was their perfect soldier, their most effective weapon. Sometimes, the afternoon sunlight streaming through the large living room window would inadvertently illuminate his face, catching the precise angle to highlight the chilling, undeniable satisfaction etched into his features, a stark, horrifying contrast between the warmth of the sun and the cold darkness within him. I remember one particular afternoon, during one of my hollow confessions, he interjected sharply, his voice laced with venom, calling me a liar. The word struck me with surprising force. A fresh stab of pain. That single, cutting word, liar, hung heavy in the stifling air between us, sharp and accusatory, echoing with an unbearable weight of truth, even though I was lying to protect myself. My parents, surprisingly, didn't react with excessive physical violence to his accusation that day. Perhaps they saw it as confirmation. But that one biting word, that single, cruel act of casual denouncement from my brother, was the proverbial straw that finally shattered my already fragile resolve, snapping something deep within me that had stubbornly held on for far too long. Something vital, something essential to my survival, finally snapped inside me, much like a rubber band stretched beyond its limits, recoiling violently, irrevocably broken. The years of emotional abuse, the physical pain, the constant surveillance, the profound betrayal, it all culminated in that single, shattering moment. In that instant, a clarity I hadn't felt in years washed over me, cold but resolute. I made the conscious, unshakable decision to leave this living hell, to escape, to reclaim my life. The weight of that decision settled deep within my chest, a cold, hard stone, yet paradoxically, it brought with it an unexpected, profound sense of comfort, a quiet certainty that, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I was finally taking control of my own destiny. The very next day, armed with a newfound, terrifying courage, I walked into school. And there, in the quiet sanctuary of the classroom, for the very first time in my entire life, I revealed the unspeakable truths of what was truly transpiring within the walls of my home to a teacher. The classroom, empty save for the two of us, felt eerily still. Afternoon sunlight, golden and gentle, streamed through the tall windows, illuminating countless dust particles dancing lazily in the beams of stark, poignant contrast to the turbulent storm raging within me. I poured out my heart, raw and unfiltered. My carefully constructed facade crumbled, and I simply broke down, dissolving into racking sobs, the years of suppressed pain finally bursting forth. The words, once trapped and suffocating, now tumbled from me in an unstoppable torrent, like water gushing from a newly ruptured dam. Years, seemingly an eternity, of agonizing pain, paralyzing fear, and profound loneliness, all spilled out onto the worn surface of the desk separating us, a messy, undeniable testament to my suffering. The teacher, bless her empathetic soul, listened with a growing look of absolute horror etched onto her features, her face draining of color, becoming starkly pale as she absorbed the full, brutal weight of my narrative. Before I could even fully comprehend the magnitude of my confession, events began to accelerate, a whirlwind sweeping me forward. In what felt like mere moments, I found myself sitting in the sterile, unfamiliar confines of the school counselor's office, a knot of apprehension tightening in my stomach, waiting for my parents to inevitably arrive and discuss this shattering revelation. Barely 20 minutes later, an unmistakable clamor from the hallway signaled their arrival. I heard them long before I saw them, their presence announced by a distinct, unsettling wave of noise. My mother's shrill voice, piercing and indignant, echoed sharply down the corridor, her tone demanding, her questions laced with an unmistakable undercurrent of fury. What in the world is going on here? And of course, just as predictably as the sun rises, my brother was right there beside them, his presence an almost darkly humorous, yet utterly expected addition to the impending confrontation. Where else would he be but at the center of the drama he so often instigated? I could hear his low, satisfied murmur, a cruel prelude to the storm about to break. My own footsteps, a frantic scuffle of nervous energy, tapped the linoleum a beat or two ahead of my parents' more measured strides. A physical manifestation of my desperate eagerness to dive headfirst into the unknown situation unfolding behind that closed door. What bizarre, adult drama awaited us? What peculiar secret needed my immediate, albeit silent, presence? The heavy office door, previously a barrier to the truth, swung inward with an almost theatrical creak, revealing my mother. She burst in first, her movement a sudden, almost aggressive rush, her face already meticulously arranged into a dramatic tableau of profound maternal worrying. Yet, even as I watched her, a cynical part of me, honed by years of observation, instantly recognized it for what it was, a meticulously crafted performance. A brittle mask of concern that utterly failed to conceal the calculating glint in her eyes. It was a charade, an elaborate deception I'd seen countless times before. Her signature perfume, a potent, heavy floral scent she favored for its perceived sophistication, immediately suffocated the small, sterile office space. It was cloying, sickly sweet, and utterly overwhelming. A noxious cloud that clung to the air and threatened to choke any other, more subtle scents that might have lingered, perhaps the faint aroma of stale coffee or old paper. It wasn't just a smell, it was an invasion. As she moved towards me, arms outstretched in a familiar, yet somehow hollow, gesture of maternal affection, I recoiled instinctively. My body, a loyal sentinel reacting to perceived danger, betrayed me before my conscious mind could even process the impulse. I flinched away, a visceral jerk, shrinking back into the worn fabric of the chair as if trying to melt into its anonymous contours, to become invisible. The counselor, Miss Patel, a woman whose calm demeanor belied a keenly observant intellect, didn't miss a beat. Her gaze, already sharp, narrowed almost imperceptibly, a flicker of understanding passing through her eyes. I could practically see the mental note being etched into her professional memory, a crucial data point filed away for later analysis. My father, by contrast, remained rooted in the doorway, a silent, imposing presence. His face, usually an open book of irritation or impatience, was a carefully constructed blank slate, utterly unreadable, offering no emotional clues whatsoever. His hands were casually tucked into his pockets, his shoulders deceptively relaxed, almost nonchalant. He presented himself as the quintessential image of a concerned yet utterly composed parent, the inflappable anchor in a tumultuous, a carefully cultivated facade, I suspected. Behind my father, partially obscured, my brother lurked, a shadow almost, peering around his broad frame with an unnervingly innocent curiosity. He was diligently attempting to project an air of wide-eyed bewilderment and naive bystander swept up in adult affairs. Yet, beneath the carefully constructed veneer of innocence, I caught the familiar flicker in his eyes, the subtle glint of calculation, the predatory assessment of the situation, already weighing the potential angles and advantages for himself. He was never truly innocent. Miss Patel, maintaining her professional composure, gestured towards the empty chairs, her voice calm but imbued with an unmistakable gravitas. "Please, have a seat," she offered, her tone leaving no room for argument. She then proceeded to explain, her words precise and measured, that we needed to have a rather serious discussion regarding some significant and deeply unsettling concerns that had come to her attention. The plastic chairs groaned audibly under their weight as my parents, still maintaining their meticulously constructed public personas, settled into them. They exchanged saccharine smiles with Miss Patel, their faces a perfectly orchestrated blend of feigned confusion and practiced innocence. "What's this all about?" my mother cooed, her voice dripping with an almost theatrical sweetness, like honey laced with venom. A tone I knew all too well signaled impending manipulation or a deliberate dismissal of reality. My brother, sensing the shift in the room's energy, retreated slightly, leaning casually against the cool, neutral wall, his arms defensively crossed over his chest. He was a spectator, observing the unfolding drama with an almost detached interest. As for me, a suffocating mix of fear, shame, and simmering resentment made it utterly impossible to meet the gaze of any of them. My eyes remained fixed on the scuffed linoleum, every nerve ending screaming. Miss Patel, cutting through the thick layer of performative pleasantries, did not mince words. She began, her voice steady and professional, by informing them that I had confided in her, sharing what she described as very troubling information concerning punishment practices within our home practices that, she paused subtly, allowing the implication to hang heavily in the air. Involved physical aspects. The unspoken word, abuse, thrummed in the sudden silence. Her delivery was impeccably clear, each word articulated with careful, professional precision, devoid of any emotional inflection. Her trusty clipboard, filled with neat, confidential notes, rested on her lap, a silent testament to the systematic documentation of my pain. My mother's carefully constructed mask of concern shattered instantly, replaced by an alarming flush of indignant fury. "Ridiculous," she shrieked, her voice abruptly soaring several octaves, a sharp, piercing sound that grated on my ears. "Absolutely preposterous. We would never hurt her." "How dare you suggest such a thing?" Her eyes, wide with what she intended to convey as righteous shock, darted between Miss Patel and me, accusing. "We love our children. We would never harm them. Never, ever." The denial was as aggressive as it was immediate, a reflex action honed by years of practice. Then, compelled by some desperate inner strength, I found my voice, though it emerged as barely a whisper, a frail, trembling sound, so faint it was almost inaudible even to my own ears. The rice, I managed to articulate, the two words hanging in the air, laden with unspoken terror and a specific, chilling memory of a particular form of punishment that had left indelible marks, both visible and invisible. My father, seizing the opportunity, smoothly interjected, effectively cutting off any further whispers I might have offered. He projected an air of calm reasonability, suggesting with a practiced ease that there must simply be a misunderstanding here. He then pivoted effortlessly, introducing the convenient narrative that I had, rather unfortunately, been having some behavioral issues lately and was prone to making up stories for attention, a familiar tactic used to discredit my every complaint. His voice was a masterclass in controlled composure, calm, measured, utterly reasonable. It was the same deceptive tone he reserved exclusively for interactions with strangers, with our neighbors across the fence, or with my unsuspecting teachers at parent-teacher conferences. It was the public-facing voice, polished and charming, a stark and terrifying contrast to the roaring fury or chilling silence I knew at home. "We are strict parents, yes," he conceded, almost magnanimously. "We believe in discipline and teaching right from wrong." He then delivered the crucial, well-rehearsed denial. "But we are not abusive." He punctuated this declaration with a slow, mournful shake of his head, a performance of profound sadness and disappointment, as if I was the one inflicting pain upon them with my false accusations. A surge of defiant courage, perhaps fueled by the mere fact that someone was actually listening, propelled my voice forward. I spoke louder, the words gaining a surprising, shaky strength. "I have marks," I declared, my voice trembling but clear, "on my knees. And on my back, the stark, undeniable reality of the physical evidence, the proof of my pain, hung heavy in the air." As if on cue, Miss Patel calmly interjected, her voice cutting through the sudden tension. She confirmed, with a professional gravity that brooked no argument, that the school nurse had, indeed, thoroughly documented these very injuries. With a quiet rustle, she flipped a page on her clipboard, her eyes scanning the precise, clinical language of the nurse's official report, lending undeniable, institutional weight to my harrowing claims. My parents, caught off guard by the undeniable evidence, exchanged a lightning-quick, almost imperceptible glance of silent, practiced communication, a desperate strategizing. Then, my father, ever the diplomat, leaned forward slightly, adopting that same perfectly modulated, reasonable tone. "I haven't eaten in 3 days." I blurted out, interrupting his practiced monologue, the words bursting forth with a raw, desperate energy. Because I wrote a note to myself. The connection between the simple act of self-communication and the severe deprivation of food was a chilling testament to the twisted logic of their control. My words, stark and utterly unambiguous, hung in the suddenly heavy air like a physical, suffocating presence, an undeniable weight that crushed all pretense. The room plunged into an immediate, profound silence, so absolute it felt as though the very air had ceased to move. The only sounds that dared to punctuate the dreadful quiet were the faint, almost imperceptible hum of the ancient air conditioning unit and the relentless, almost mocking, tick-tock of the wall clock, each second stretching into an eternity. Even my brother, that perpetual observer of my misery, shifted uncomfortably in his spot against the wall, a rare moment of genuine disquiet disrupting his usual self-satisfied composure. For once, the smug, knowing smirk that often graced his lips was conspicuously absent. Instead, a fleeting, almost imperceptible flicker of genuine nervousness darted across his face, a raw vulnerability I had almost never witnessed. My mother, recovering with startling speed, immediately launched into another furious denial, her voice regaining its shrill pitch. "A complete lie," she vehemently declared, "an utter fabrication. We had dinner together just last night," her gaze, sharp and demanding, then flickered towards my brother, her eyes widening almost imperceptibly a silent, yet undeniably potent command for him to corroborate her carefully constructed falsehood. Without a moment's hesitation, like a well-trained automaton, he instantly backed her up, his voice remarkably steady, almost devoid of emotion. "We did," he affirmed, adding a seemingly innocent but strategically placed detail. "And Mom even made lasagna last night." His delivery was so practiced, so smooth. It was chillingly clear. They had rehearsed this performance, this united front against me, countless times before. This wasn't a spontaneous act. It was a well-honed, terrifyingly effective strategy. They had refined this brutal dance of denial and psychological gaslighting over years, consistently presenting an impenetrable, united front against my every attempt to speak my truth, systematically isolating and invalidating my experiences. Desperate to counter their perfectly crafted lie, I turned back to Miss Patel, my voice regaining a fragile clarity. I described the reality of that dinner. I ate at the kitchen counter. I confessed, the words tasting bitter, alone, my hands, twisted into tight knots in my lap, reflected the churning anguish within me, my fingernails digging sharp crescents into my palms, a desperate anchor against the rising tide of despair and betrayal. They, meanwhile, had sat comfortably at the dining table, a stark visual representation of my deliberate exclusion. The ultimate cruelty wasn't just the physical separation. Throughout the meal, they had meticulously, deliberately, avoided any eye contact, any conversation, any acknowledgement of my very existence. They acted as if I were utterly invisible, a ghost haunting their perfect family tableau, the silence a weapon designed to wound far deeper than any shout. My father's previously unreadable face hardened visibly, the muscles along his jaw clenching, transforming his composed expression into a mask of cold fury. "This is getting completely out of hand," he declared, his voice losing its reasonable veneer, replaced by a steely edge. "We are taking her home now," he announced, a pronouncement rather than a statement, to sort out this misunderstanding. As a family, he stood abruptly, the suddenness of his movement jolting the room, his chair scraping loudly and gratingly against the floor, a harsh, declarative sound that underscored the finality of his decision and the nascent aggression in his posture. The word family, usually a sanctuary, a haven of love and support, twisted into something profoundly sinister when it left his lips. In that moment, spoken with such cold command, it resonated not as an invitation to unity, but as an explicit, terrifying threat. A promise of further punishment under the guise of familial reconciliation. But Miss Patel, resolute and unyielding, also rose from her chair, meeting my father's aggressive stance with an unwavering calm. Her voice, firm and brooking absolutely no argument, cut through the tension with the force of a cold blade. "I'm afraid," she stated, her words carrying the weight of institutional authority, "that won't be possible today. I have already contacted Child Protective Services, and they are sending someone over to speak with all of us. The die had been cast. The point of no return had been crossed." Her tone was a granite wall against which their manipulations would now utterly break. It was firm, unwavering, leaving not a single crack for argument or negotiation. In that instant, an almost palpable chill permeated the small office, as if the temperature had plummeted 20 degrees, or perhaps even more, in a fraction of a second. The air, previously thick with unspoken accusations and defensive denials, suddenly became heavy, suffocatingly dense, pressing down on my chest and making each breath a laborious, shallow struggle. My mother's brittle, fake smile, the one she had so meticulously maintained, vanished utterly, melting away like ice under a sudden, scorching heat. Her lips compressed into a thin, angry line, as sharp and unforgiving as a knife's edge, and her eyes, once wide with feigned confusion, narrowed into slits of pure, unadulterated fury. My father's jaw tightened visibly, clenching with an ominous, familiar intensity that precise, terrifying way it always did, a chilling precursor to him reaching for his belt. The memory of its familiar weight, the metallic buckle, sent a fresh wave of terror through me. I instinctively pressed back even further into the relative safety of the chair, trying to make myself smaller, invisible, anticipating a blow that, for now, was held at bay. "We are good parents," he insisted, his voice now dangerously quiet, almost a hiss, yet meticulously controlled. "We have done nothing wrong." The words were an icy declaration. But beneath the veneer of force calm, I could almost feel the molten anger simmering, bubbling just beneath the surface, threatening to erupt at any moment. My brother, sensing the mounting pressure and his parents' distress, suddenly propelled himself off the wall, rushing to their defense. His words tumbled out in a desperate, frantic torrent. "She makes stuff up all the time for attention," he accused, his voice rising with theatrical indignation. "She even lied about having a stomach ache last week just to skip a math test." The accusation was a cunning, cruel fabrication, a convenient deflection designed to undermine my credibility entirely. The words rushed out of him, a torrent of frantic, desperate accusations, a clear sign of his own growing panic. A wave of profound disbelief washed over me, a physical shock to my system. I simply couldn't comprehend the brazenness of his lie. I had never, not once in my entire life, skipped a test, let alone feigned illness to do so. My academic performance, my meticulously maintained good grades, or my only armor, the solitary, fragile shield that sometimes, just sometimes, afforded me a fleeting measure of safety. A temporary reprieve from their wrath. To imply I would jeopardize that was an insult to my desperate survival strategy. The sheer, unadulterated injustice of his baseless accusation, the deliberate perversion of my reality, hit me with a physical force, a sharp, searing ache blossoming in my chest. A profound sense of betrayal crushing the last vestiges of hope. Just then, a sharp, resonant knock echoed through the room. A sound so utterly official, so unmistakably authoritative, that it instantly commanded everyone's attention. The collective tension, thick and suffocating only moments before, seemed to physically cleave in two, dissipating slightly as all heads, mine included, instinctively swiveled towards the door. A woman, impeccably dressed in a crisp navy blazer that exuded an aura of quiet authority, stepped into the room. Her presence was immediate and impactful. "Marissa Wilson, Child Protective Services," she announced, her voice calm and clear, making the identification unmistakable. Her sensible, low-heeled shoes clicked with a sharp, decisive rhythm against the linoleum floor as she entered, her gaze sweeping the room, a professional notebook already held firmly in one hand. Ready to document the truth behind her, a more imposing figure, a uniformed police officer, Officer Torres, stepped into view. His presence, an undeniable symbol of law and order, amplified the gravity of the situation tenfold. His dark blue uniform rustled almost imperceptibly as he moved with professional precision, positioning himself discreetly yet strategically near the doorway. His polished silver badge catching and reflecting the harsh fluorescent light, a stark, metallic glint that felt utterly absolute. My heart, a frantic hummingbird trapped within my ribs, hammered against my chest with such ferocious intensity I genuinely feared it might rupture, might burst free from its confines. The roaring rush of blood in my ears, a tumultuous ocean of sound, threatened to completely drown out the already muted voices and conversations unfolding around me, enveloping me in a terrifying internal cacophony. What unfolded next was, without a doubt, the most profoundly surreal, almost dreamlike, hour of my entire young life, a disorienting blur of accusation, denial, and chilling theatricality. My parents, seamlessly resuming their roles as aggrieved victims, denied absolutely everything with a practiced, unwavering conviction. They masterfully painted a detailed, sympathetic picture of a deeply troubled teenager, prone to dramatic fabrications and making up stories for attention, a narrative designed to completely discredit my every word. Their voices, laced with feigned despair, recounted countless tales of how hard they tried and how much they sacrificed, conveniently positioning themselves as benevolent, long-suffering caregivers burdened by an ungrateful child. Their carefully chosen words flowed from them with an unnerving smoothness, each phrase, each indignant inflection, revealing the chilling truth. This was a well-rehearsed performance, a perfected script designed to charm and deceive. My brother, ever loyal to the family's manufactured narrative, echoed their every sentiment, providing enthusiastic, almost evangelical corroboration. He enthusiastically described a picture-perfect family life, a harmonious domestic idyll that bore absolutely no resemblance to the cold, often brutal, reality I had endured, a life that, in truth, had never, not even for a fleeting moment, genuinely existed. His hands, usually so still, gestured animatedly as he spun his web of lies, lending a theatrical flair to his performance. His eyes, wide and seemingly earnest, were brimming with a false sincerity, a carefully constructed illusion of truth that only amplified the profound betrayal I felt. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of their synchronized deceit, Miss Wilson, her gaze unwavering, turned to me. "I would like to speak with you alone," she stated, her words a lifeline, a beacon of fragile hope cutting through the oppressive atmosphere. In a smaller office, its air thick with unspoken tensions. I pulled up my pant legs, revealing my knees, still weeping and angry, a network of raw, scabbed tissue where the rice grains had gouged into my flesh. The skin was a mottled red, a moonscape of tiny, painful indentations, each a precise scar marking where the sharp edges had dug in, leaving their indelible signature. Then, with a trembling hand, I pulled up my shirt, baring my back. There, a macabre tapestry of purple and yellow bruises in various stages of healing mapped out a silent, brutal history. A gallery of torment illustrating the countless times the belt had found its mark. I recounted everything. The forced confessions, whispered under duress, the invasive, destructive searches of my meager belongings. The sickening crunch of my phone as it was smashed under their heel. The words poured out of me like a dam finally breaking, a toxic reservoir draining away, and with each syllable a tiny, almost imperceptible sliver of the immense burden I carried lifted, leaving me feeling infinitesimally lighter. When we returned to the waiting room, my parents had already perfected their performance. A brittle mask of composure stretched across their faces, all smiles and feigned concern. But beneath the facade, their eyes, when they met mine, burned with a chilling inferno of fury, a silent, scorching declaration promising swift and severe consequences. Ms. Wilson, ever the calm, steady anchor in the swirling chaos, announced with professional detachment, yet undeniable kindness, that a home visit would be necessary. For tonight, she explained, they believed it was in my best interest to stay with an emergency foster family while the investigation proceeded. Her voice, though matter of fact, conveyed a warmth that felt like a lifeline. My dad, however, reacted with a sudden, violent lurch, rising so fast his chair tipped over backward, hitting the floor with a harsh, metallic protest that shattered the fragile quiet of the small office. "You can't take my child," he roared, his voice thick with a self-righteous fury. "This is outrageous." A crimson tide crept up his neck, engulfing his face in that familiar shade of red, a visible barometer of his escalating rage. Officer Torres, a silent, unwavering presence until now, stepped forward. His voice was calm, a stark contrast to my father's bluster, as he suggested cooperation, reiterating that this was merely a temporary measure. As the investigation proceeded, his hand rested casually near his belt, not threatening, but undeniably present, a subtle, yet undeniable, assertion of authority. "Sir, please lower your voice and have a seat," he instructed, his tone firm. Could my father truly be oblivious to the unspoken warning? My mom, not to be outdone, began to sob, a performance honed over years, a flood of crocodile tears streaming down her face, streaking her makeup. She begged them not to take her baby, insisting they were good parents, frantically looking to my brother for validation. A stark contradiction, her eyes, despite the deluge of tears, remained dry and calculating, devoid of true sorrow. He, in turn, nodded vigorously, a fervent, almost desperate affirmation of their supposed virtue. insisting they were the best parents and that this wasn't fair. His voice cracked with what sounded like genuine emotion, a practiced tremor. But I knew better. It was a carefully constructed veneer, a hollow echo of feeling. I sat there, frozen, a statue carved from disbelief, unable to fully process the surreal tableau unfolding before me. The voices around me seemed to fade in and out, a chaotic symphony of muffled sounds, like a radio with poor reception, its signals distorted and distant. After years of living submerged in a suffocating ocean of pain and fear, someone was finally truly listening to me. Someone was actually doing something. The realization was a seismic shift, a truth so monumental it threatened to shatter the very foundations of my reality, almost too big to comprehend. Miss Wilson, her presence a comforting anchor, helped me gather my meager belongings from my locker. The metal door clanged shut with a sharp, metallic punctuation, the sound echoing down the empty hallway, a solitary cry in the vast quiet. I didn't have much, just a few textbooks and a worn jacket, a testament to a life stripped bare. My parents weren't allowed to approach me, yet I could feel the palpable heat of their eyes, staring into my back, an invisible, burning brand as I walked down the hallway. The linoleum floor squeaked mournfully under my shoes with each deliberate step, a rhythmic lament marking my path away from them. My brother called out to me once, his voice laced with a faint concern, but Officer Torres stepped swiftly between us. "Stay back, please," he said firmly. My brother's face twisted, the carefully constructed facade of a loving sibling cracking, revealing a flicker of raw, selfish anger and frustration beneath. That night, a stark contrast to the life I'd known, I stayed with a foster family named the Jacksons. Their house exuded a quiet, gentle peace, a haven of unexpected tranquility. They led me to a guest room that had a lock on the door, a small, metallic promise of safety I hadn't realized I craved. The room itself was simple yet meticulously clean, with pale blue walls that seemed to absorb the lingering anxieties within me, and a window that overlooked a small, tended garden. A vista of gentle, untamed beauty. Mrs. Jackson, her voice soft and reassuring, told me, "This is your space. No one will come in without your permission." It was a revolutionary concept, a quiet declaration of agency I had never known. I used it. I locked the door, and then, a torrent of pent-up emotion finally unleashed. I cried. I cried until exhaustion claimed me, the pillow muffling my sobs. But these were not solely tears of pain. They were tears of immense relief, the bittersweet overflow of a soul finally unburdened. A cleansing storm washing away years of stored-up sorrow. The next few days became a blur, a swirling kaleidoscope of new faces, probing questions, and clinical doctor visits. CPS investigators meticulously pieced together the fragments of my story, uncovering silent, damning confessions. They found the rice in our kitchen pantry. The bag was conspicuously half empty, grains spilled haphazardly in the corner of the cabinet where it was kept accrual. Scattered testament to the punishment. They found the belt, too. The leather, smooth and darkened in the middle by countless impacts, bore grim evidence of frequent, brutal use. They interviewed neighbors who, with a collective shiver of belated guilt, admitted they'd often heard yelling and crying echoing from our house but had never wanted to get involved in someone else's parenting. "We thought they were just strict," one neighbor stammered. Looking profoundly ashamed, how many times had those cries pierced the suburban quiet, only to be dismissed? My parents, however, fought the investigation every step of the way, launching a relentless, desperate counteroffensive. They hired a lawyer, a Mr. Redden, whose very attire and expensive suit, a briefcase of polished leather screamed authority and expense. He specialized in family cases. They spun a venomous narrative, a carefully constructed smear campaign, telling everyone who would listen that I was troubled, that I was lying, that I was tearing the family apart for attention. Their voices, a haunting, insidious whisper, followed me everywhere. An omnipresent, invisible chain, even when they weren't physically present. Worst of all, they began showing up everywhere, a chilling omnipresence, like ghosts refusing to be exorcised. When I went to school, my mom's silver sedan would be parked across the street, idling silently at the curb, its tinted windows not quite dark enough to conceal her watching face of pale, and blinking sentinel maintaining a silent, predatory vigil. When I left the Jackson's house with Mrs. Jackson to go to the store, my dad would somehow, impossibly, be there, watching from his car. The feeling of being watched was an invisible, suffocating net that made my skin crawl, the back of my neck prickling with a constant, low-grade hum of dread, a visceral alarm. My brother, in his own cruel twist, began sending messages to the few school friends I had, spreading poison through my small social circle. He told them I was mentally ill and making everything up. "She's always been like this," he'd insist. "She makes up stories for attention." Some friends, tragically, believed him. They started avoiding me in the hallways, their whispers sharp as broken glass, murdering behind their hands as I passed. One afternoon, I spotted my brother following me between classes, a new layer of isolation closing in. The crowded hallway seemed to part slightly as he moved through it, his eyes fixed on me with a predatory intensity. When I finally confronted him, he just smiled that same chilling, familiar smirk I'd seen 1,000 times before, as near veiled in faint innocence. He leaned in close, his breath smelling jarringly of mint gum, and whispered, his words meant only for me, each a poisoned arrow aimed at my deepest fears. "They would never believe you. They know we were a good family, and that you were the problem, and always had been." I called CPS that day, a desperate act of self-preservation, and told them about the stalking. Miss Wilson, ever my advocate, helped me file for a restraining order, guiding me through the labyrinthine paperwork. The courthouse was an imposing structure, all cold marble and echoing hallways, a cavernous monument to justice, its polished surfaces reflecting the gravity of the proceedings. The judge granted it, but the legal document proved a flimsy barrier, a paper shield against a relentless tide. It didn't stop them. They merely grew more careful, their surveillance becoming more insidious, more subtle, staying just far enough away to avoid getting in trouble. The order provided little actual protection, just a false sense of security. A mirage of safety dissolving a little more each time I caught a fleeting glimpse of their silver sedan or felt their unseen eyes burning into me from the periphery. It was then, a chilling moment, that my gaze nagged on them, their eyes, cold and unwavering, fixed entirely on me. A prickle of profound unease, a familiar dread coiled in my stomach. 3 agonizing weeks later, after I had finally, bravely, found my voice to articulate the unspeakable, the court, a bastion of somber authority, was finally ready to render its judgment. Each day of those weeks had stretched into an eternity, heavy with anticipation and dread, as I waited for the legal machinery to grind to its inevitable conclusion. The air in the courtroom hung thick and heavy, a suffocating blend of stale, dust, and nervous anticipation. The room itself was an imposing tableau of legal formality, all darkwood and hushed whispers. Beneath me, the polished wooden benches offered no comfort, their unforgiving surfaces pressing against my already strained body, each grain feeling like an accusation. The verdict, when it finally came, felt both devastating and, perhaps, a whisper of hope. My parents' parental rights were not irrevocably severed, but merely suspended. This suspension, however, came with stringent conditions, a mandatory gauntlet of parenting classes and intensive therapy sessions. A clear directive for them to address the deep-seated issues that had brought us to this precipice. It was a temporary measure, a probation, demanding fundamental change before they could even contemplate reclaiming their role. As for me, the judge declared I would remain firmly rooted in the unfamiliar landscape of foster care for a substantial period, a minimum of 6 long months. 6 months felt like an eternity, a vast, uncharted ocean stretching before me, filled with unknowns. The judge's gavel descended, a swift, decisive strike that echoed through the hushed chamber, producing a sharp, resounding crack. The sudden, percussive sound ripped through the tension, making me involuntarily flinch, a jolt running through my already frayed nerves. Stepping out of the courthouse, blinking against the harsh afternoon light, my gaze immediately found them. They stood rigidly by their car, a silent, unmoving tableau of resentment and desperation, their figures stark against the backdrop of the parking lot. The expansive parking lot shimmered under the relentless assault of the afternoon sun, the black asphalt a vast, heat-absorbing canvas that radiated waves of stifling warmth upwards. The air was thick, heavy, almost suffocating. And there she was, my mom, her shoulders shaking with the familiar, yet wrenching sobs that had become a sorrowful soundtrack to my life, again. Her face was a tear-streaked mask of anguish, a sight that usually twisted my insides, but today felt strangely distant. In stark contrast, my dad's face was a hardened mask, sculpted from what appeared to be granite. Every muscle was taut, his jaw clenched, radiating an icy, unyielding anger that seemed to solidify the air around him. There was no visible sorrow, only a profound, almost terrifying, stillness. Then there was my brother, his eyes, usually so familiar, now burning with an unsettling cocktail of raw hatred and palpable confusion. His stare was a physical assault, a venomous glare that seemed to bore directly into my soul, making my skin prickle and crawl with an acute sense of revulsion. It was as if he blamed me, yet couldn't fully comprehend why. As I began to walk away, each step feeling strangely light yet heavy, his eyes, those hostile windows to his conflicted emotions, narrowed into suspicious slits, following my retreating form with an almost predatory intensity. And then his voice, a raw, guttural roar that sliced through the thick afternoon air, shattered the fragile silence. "This isn't over," he bellowed, the words laced with an unmistakable threat. "Families belong together. We will get you back." It was a declaration, a desperate promise, and a chilling warning all rolled into one. A desperate refusal to accept the court's decree. His voice, thick with defiance and a desperate, almost manic resolve, resonated across the vast expanse of the parking lot, carrying every syllable with jarring clarity. Heads turned, conversations ceased, and a ripple of hushed whispers followed in its wake, transforming our private tragedy into a very public spectacle. But I offered no response. No defiant retort, no desperate plea, not even a flinch. A profound, almost surreal calm had settled over me. And in that moment, for the very first time in what felt like an eternity, after years of walking on eggshells, of carefully constructed answers and forced compliance, I realized, with a breathtaking clarity, that I didn't have to. The unspoken obligation, the constant pressure to manage their emotions, to appease, to respond, had inexplicably vanished. This sudden, stark realization was a strange, bewildering paradox, utterly terrifying in its newness, yet unbelievably, exhilaratingly liberating in its freedom. It was as if a crushing weight I hadn't even known I was carrying had been unceremoniously lifted. My new life with the Jacksons, a family I barely knew, was, to put it mildly, an exercise in profound strangeness initially. It was a complete departure from everything I had ever known, like stepping into an alternate reality. Their house, a bastion of unexpected tranquility, was consistently, almost unnervingly, quiet. There were no jarring shouts that splintered the air, no violent slamming of doors that vibrated through the floorboards, no sudden explosions of rage. Only a gentle hum of quiet activity, a peaceful murmur that was utterly foreign to me, Mrs. Jackson, a woman who radiated an innate warmth, possessed soft, gentle hands that seemed to convey kindness with every touch, and hair that was beginning to elegantly streak with silver. How the demanding but rewarding profession of a kindergarten teacher. She was a beacon of quiet respect, a principle she extended even to me. She always asked permission before crossing the threshold into my room, a simple gesture that spoke volumes. It was always the same soft, almost hesitant knock on my door, a sound so utterly unlike the thunderous pounding I was accustomed to. Then her gentle voice, "May I come in?" Each time, despite its repeated occurrence, the sheer politeness of the question still managed to startle me, a faint echo of surprise rippling through my system. It was a foreign concept, this granting of personal space, this acknowledgement of my autonomy. Mr. Jackson, a man of quiet demeanor and thoughtful presence, worked diligently from his home office, his days marked by the gentle tap of a keyboard rather than any loud pronouncements. Remarkably, his voice never, not once, ascended above a calm, conversational tone. Even in moments of stress or frustration, which were rare, his voice remained steadfastly even. When life inevitably threw its curveballs, and a hint of frustration might cross his brow, he didn't erupt. Instead, he would simply articulate his thoughts, his words measured and clear, his tone unwavering in its calm. It was a masterclass in controlled communication, a stark contrast to the volatile outbursts I'd grown up with. Their home, like any well-ordered household, certainly had its set of rules, its guiding principles for harmonious living. However, these weren't arbitrary decrees or traps designed for failure. They were, instead, refreshingly simple, practical expectations, a gentle reminder to place my dirty dishes into the dishwasher after meals, or a simple request to inform them if my plans changed and I might be delayed returning home from school. These were not commands, but mutual understandings designed for consideration and routine. And even the presentation of these rules spoke volumes. They weren't etched in stone or delivered with a stern lecture, but playfully scribbled on a cheerful, brightly colored notepad held by a whimsical magnet on the refrigerator door. They felt more like friendly suggestions than rigid mandates. There were no veiled threats hanging heavy in the air, no implied consequences looming like dark clouds. Punishment, that omnipresent shadow from my past, was simply absent from the equation here. The very concepts of forced confessions, intrusive searches, or punitive consequences simply did not exist within these walls. It was a space utterly devoid of the constant, gnawing fear of being caught, of being wrong, of being punished for something real or imagined. This profound, almost unimaginable, absence of fear was deeply disorienting, unsettling in its unfamiliarity. It was akin to the strange sensation of stepping off a rapidly moving walkway onto solid, stationary ground. The world suddenly felt stable, yet your body still expected motion, creating a dizzying sense of imbalance. My internal compass, so long calibrated to navigate fear, was utterly lost. For the entire first week, an undercurrent of anxiety churned within me. I was constantly bracing myself, perpetually anticipating the inevitable moment when the other shoe would drop, when the facade of calm would shatter, and the familiar chaos would inevitably return. Every quiet moment felt like the calm before a storm. My body, still programmed for self-preservation, reacted without conscious thought. If Mr. Jackson innocently reached across the table for the salt shaker, or moved to grab a book from a shelf beside me, I'd involuntarily flinch, my muscles tensing, my breath catching in my throat. My sudden, almost imperceptible tremor would always make him pause, his hand freezing midair. His eyes, usually so placid, would fill with a quiet, profound sadness, yet also with a deep, unwavering understanding. There was no judgment, only a patient recognition of the wounds I carried. Nighttime brought its own torments. I'd frequently jolt awake in the dead of night, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, utterly convinced I could hear the hushed sounds of someone stealthily rummaging through my belongings, searching for some imagined transgression. The old house, settling into its nightly rhythm, emitted unfamiliar creaks and groans, each groan and pop amplified in the oppressive silence of the dark. Every single sound, however benign, would send a jolt of pure adrenaline coursing through my veins, my heart accelerating into a panic gallop. Mrs. Jackson, with her observant yet gentle nature, quickly noticed my ingrained habit of discreetly hoarding food within the confines of my room, tucking away snacks like a squirrel preparing for winter. Instead of admonishment, she approached me with a soft-spoken reassurance, her voice a balm. She simply stated, with unwavering sincerity, that I was always, without exception, welcome to anything in their well-stocked kitchen, whether it was the middle of the day or the darkest hour of the night. It was an open invitation, an unconditional offer of sustenance. My deeply ingrained distrust, a survival mechanism honed over years, made it impossible to fully believe her words at first. The idea of such unconditional access, such generosity, felt like a trick, a temporary reprieve before the inevitable withdrawal. So I continued my clandestine routine, furtively slipping granola bars and crisp apples into the bottom of my dresser drawer, carefully concealing them beneath piles of folded clothes. An unwitting testament to the scarcity I had once known. Remarkably, she never once searched my room, never uttered a single word of suspicion. And even when the fruit bowl on the kitchen counter seemed to mysteriously empty at an unusually rapid pace, she simply refilled it, offering no comment, no pointed glances, only a quiet, empathetic understanding. One evening, as the gentle clatter of plates accompanied our joint effort to clear the dinner table, Mrs. Jackson casually, almost serenely, informed me of an upcoming appointment. It wasn't a demand, but a gentle disclosure. "We've scheduled a therapy session for you tomorrow," she said, her voice soft but firm, "with Dr. Rivera, who specializes in helping kids who've navigated through particularly challenging situations." The carefully chosen words, the subtle timing, showed a deep consideration for my feelings. The ceramic plates, still warm from dinner, produced soft, almost musical clinks as we carefully stacked them beside the sink, the sounds punctuating the hushed announcement. Despite the gentle delivery, my stomach automatically clenched into a tight, anxious knot. My body, ever vigilant, responded with a stiff, almost involuntary nod, even as my mind immediately began its frantic race, rehearsing a mental script of acceptable answers. A litany of carefully curated responses designed to deflect, to please, to survive. These weren't honest answers, not truly. They were safe answers, meticulously constructed verbal shields, the kind I had learned would protect me from criticism, from anger, from the crushing weight of punishment. Dr. Rivera, when I finally met her, was a refreshing, almost startling, departure from my preconceived notions of a therapist. She shattered every expectation I harbored. Her eyes twinkled behind a pair of spectacularly bright purple glasses, a whimsical splash of color against her kind face. Her small, cozy office wasn't sterile or intimidating. Instead, it was a veritable treasure trove brimming with an array of intriguing fidget toys that begged to be touched, and an inviting collection of vibrant art supplies, beckoning creativity. Even the windowsill was alive, adorned with a verdant procession of thriving, leafy plants, their vibrant green leaves a testament to growth and resilience, filling the space with a quiet, natural energy. Crucially, she didn't force the issue, didn't immediately plunge into the painful, raw territory of my past with my parents. There was no pressure, no aggressive probing. Instead, we simply sat together drawing pictures with colorful crayons, allowing our imaginations to wander, or exploring the fascinating, tactile world of kinetic sand. The atmosphere was light, unburdened by heavy expectations. The kinetic sand, cool and impossibly smooth, flowed and shifted between my fingers with an almost magical fluidity. It molded effortlessly into ephemeral shapes, then just as easily reformed, a malleable medium that seemed to mirror a nascent sense of control and release within me. Then, something shifted. By our third session, the dam within me, so long fortified against emotion and truth, finally cracked. Words, a torrent of long-suppressed thoughts and feelings, began to spill out of me, a rush of stories and anxieties, much like water gushing from a newly broken dam, unstoppable and overwhelming. I found myself confiding in her things I had guarded with fierce protectiveness, secrets I'd never dared whisper to another living soul. Not even to the kindest of previous social workers like Miss Patel or Miss Wilson. Her small office, infused with its unique blend of warmth and whimsy, felt incredibly, inexplicably safe. It became a sanctuary, a protective bubble somehow suspended outside the relentless flow of normal time and space, where I could simply be. When I haltingly described my constant state of alert, how even the smallest, most innocuous noises would make me jump, and my compulsive habit of checking and rechecking the locks on my bedroom door multiple times before I could even attempt to sleep, she didn't dismiss it. Instead, she offered a name, a diagnosis, hypervigilance. Her explanation was calm, clear, and immensely clarifying. She gently explained that this wasn't a flaw, but rather my brain's deeply ingrained, albeit misguided, attempt to keep me safe, a primal response to prolonged threat. "It makes perfect sense," she assured me, her voice resonating with empathy. "After everything you've endured, your brain is just trying to protect you." That validation, those simple words of understanding, cascaded over me like cool, soothing water on a searing burn. It was an unexpected, profound relief, a sensation I hadn't realized I was so desperately craving. For what felt like an eternity, I had been systematically told that my feelings were invalid, my interpretations of reality skewed, my very perceptions fundamentally flawed. It was a narrative designed to make me doubt my own sanity. In essence, I was wrong, always wrong, about everything. To have someone, a professional no less, calmly affirm that my reactions, my fears, my very existence, made sense given my experiences, was almost too overwhelming to fully absorb. It was a monumental shift in perspective, a shattering of a deeply ingrained false belief. And so, in the quiet sanctuary of her office that day, I cried. Not tears of profound sadness, though there was certainly a wellspring of that within me, but rather an overwhelming, purified deluge of relief. It was the shedding of a heavy burden, the washing away of years of internalized guilt and confusion. Paradoxically, while the Jacksons' home offered a new sense of peace, navigating the bustling, often unforgiving world of school proved to be significantly harder. A harsh return to external realities. The school hallways, once merely a backdrop to my daily routines, now felt like sensory assault zones. They were a cacophony of jarring noises, a suffocating crush of unfamiliar bodies, and an unpredictable maze of social interactions that left me feeling exposed and utterly overwhelmed. The notoriously efficient high school grapevine, a relentless conveyor belt of whispers and speculation, had worked its insidious magic. Suddenly, it seemed every student, every teacher, held some fragmented, often distorted, piece of information about the dramatic upheaval in my family's life. My private pain had become public fodder. A noticeable number of students, driven by an uncomfortable mix of fear and awkwardness, actively avoided me. as if the trauma I carried was some highly contagious disease that might infect them simply by proximity. They'd avert their gaze, their body language broadcasting a clear message: stay away. I'd watch, my stomach clenching, as they would deliberately cross to the opposite side of the hallway, creating a wide berth of avoidance the moment they caught sight of me approaching. Then there were the others, those who lacked any semblance of social grace or empathy. They approached with a brazen curiosity, bombarding me with intrusive, deeply personal questions that felt like violations, each query making my skin crawl with discomfort and resentment. They'd lean in, their voices barely hushed, to whisper questions like, "Is it true your dad really hit you?" or with an air of naive judgment, "Why didn't you just run away if it was so bad?" Their casual cruelty stung, stripping away the last vestiges of my privacy. Their morbid curiosity wasn't just annoying. It felt like a fresh wound, another invasive breach of my already fragile personal boundaries, a grotesque echo of the violations I had just escaped. Thankfully, amidst a sea of indifference and intrusive stares, a precious few individuals extended genuine kindness. Chief among them was my English teacher, Miss Hoffman, a woman whose quiet understanding was a beacon of light. Recognizing the sheer impossibility of navigating the chaotic, deafening cafeteria, she graciously offered her classroom as a haven, a place where I could retreat during lunch breaks when the sensory overload became too much to bear. Her classroom, a haven of hushed tranquility filled with the comforting scent of old books and adorned with thought-provoking literary posters, swiftly transformed into my personal sanctuary. It was a space where the noise of the world outside momentarily faded. "Take all the time you need," she would often say, her voice soft but firm, a silent reassurance that I was seen, and that my needs were valid. She would simply continue grading papers at her desk, the gentle rustle of pages the only sound, while I ate my sandwich in the profound, healing silence of her presence. No questions, no demands, just quiet, unwavering support. Just as a fragile sense of normalcy began to settle, a new, insidious threat emerged, a chilling escalation that shattered my budding peace. The anonymous, menacing notes began to appear, tucked inside the cold metal confines of my locker. Each day, with a growing sense of dread, I'd pull open the heavy metal door of my locker, the dull clang echoing in the busy hallway, and there it would be, a stark, unwelcome presence. Waiting for me, always the same, a piece of paper, folded with deliberate precision, resting conspicuously on top of my textbooks, a casual yet deeply unsettling invasion of my personal space. The inaugural note was stark in its simplicity, yet profoundly unsettling. LARI, the single word, my name, screamed back at me from the page, written in all capital letters. The pen pressed with such furious intensity that it left deep, angry indentations on the paper, almost as if branded. My hands, suddenly cold and trembling, instinctively crumpled the menacing paper into a tight ball. I threw it away with a desperate, almost frantic motion, trying to erase its hateful message from existence. The hallway trash can, already disgustingly overflowing with the detritus of teenage life, offered little resistance. I shoved the crumpled note deep down, burying it amidst the discarded wrappers and forgotten assignments, a futile attempt to make it disappear entirely. But the nightmare wasn't over. The very next day, as if on cue, another note appeared, a chilling testament to their relentless campaign. This one was more venomous, more personal. "They cried themselves to sleep because of you." The words were a sharp stab, designed to twist the knife of guilt deep into my already wounded psyche, attempting to paint me as the villain in their narrative of suffering. There was no doubt. My stomach dropped with a sickening lurch as I recognized the distinctive, familiar loops and flourishes of his handwriting immediately. It was undeniably my brother's cruel scrawl, a stark realization that twisted into my gut, a painful sense of betrayal washing over me. The exaggerated loops of his Y's, the sharp, almost aggressive hooks of his G's, these were patterns etched into my memory, instantly recognizable from countless shared homework assignments, hastily scribbled notes, and birthday cards exchanged over the years. With a renewed sense of fear, but also a burgeoning resolve, I promptly reported these malicious notes to Ms. Wilson, my foster care social worker, recounting the chilling discovery. She, in turn, wasted no time, immediately escalating the issue by contacting the school authorities. The school, taking the matter seriously, initiated an investigation, meticulously reviewing the security footage from the hallways, hoping to catch the culprit in the act. But I could never quite catch who was leaving them, these small, unsettling reminders that felt like a deliberate intrusion into my peace. My brother, a master of psychological warfare, was far too cunning for such a simple trap. He had always possessed an unnerving talent for inflicting pain, for twisting emotional knives, all while maintaining an untraceable distance, leaving no fingerprints on the wounds he so skillfully inflicted. His methods were subtle, insidious, and devastatingly effective, making him an invisible tormentor. One sun-drenched afternoon, the kind where the air shimmered with the promise of summer, I was making the familiar journey home from school. My backpack felt lighter than usual, a fleeting sense of freedom in my step, when a car, dark and imposing, gradually slowed beside me. The engine, a low, guttural hum, matched my unhurried pace, a predator stalking its prey. Inside, a tableau of familiar unease, my mother at the wheel, her knuckles white on the steering wheel, and my brother, a silent, predatory shadow, in the passenger seat. With an almost theatrical electric whir, her window glided down, revealing a face etched with what appeared to be raw anguish. She called out, her voice a brittle, breaking plea that seemed to tear at the very fabric of the air around us, begging me to return home, promising, almost desperately, that they had fundamentally changed. "We miss you so much," she choked out, fat, glistening tears tracing paths down her cheeks, a stark contrast to the bright afternoon. "Please, darling, just talk to us. We need you." Was this genuine remorse, I wondered, or just another one of their carefully orchestrated performances? I kept my gaze fixed resolutely forward, each muscle in my body screaming defiance, my heart a frantic drum solo against the cage of my ribs. The sidewalk before me seemed to stretch into an infinite, desolate ribbon, each deliberate step an immense, draining effort, as if I were wading through unseen concrete. Then a sharp, accusatory voice pierced the silence, jarring me from my internal struggle. It was my brother, his words a venomous projectile. He roared that I was tearing our family apart, his voice thick with a faint indignation that barely masked the true fury underneath. "Is this what you want?" he snarled, his face a vivid, angry crimson, the veneer of concern, that practiced mask of familial love, completely shattered, revealing the raw, ugly truth beneath. "You're destroying everything," he shrieked, his voice cracking with a chilling blend of anger and something else, a sadistic pleasure. The dam broke. Without a second thought, I bolted, a desperate surge of adrenaline propelling me forward. I ran, lungs burning like fire, legs screaming in protest, each frantic stride carrying me further from their suffocating presence. I didn't stop until the welcoming embrace of the Jacksons' house loomed into view. Bursting through their front door, gasping for air, the words tumbling out in ragged bursts, I recounted the harrowing encounter to Mr. Jackson. Without a moment's hesitation, he made the call to Miss Wilson, her voice a beacon of professional calm. She meticulously added the incident to her ever-thickening file, a testament to their repeated transgressions, and sternly reminded my parents of the restraining order's sanctity. "This is a grave matter," she informed them, her tone unwavering, her words cutting through the phone line like ice. "The next infraction, the very next violation, will not merely carry consequences. It will trigger irreversible repercussions, legal and profound." That night, my phone, usually a quiet companion, transformed into an instrument of torment. It buzzed incessantly, a constant, jarring vibration against my bedside table, lighting up with a relentless barrage of notifications. Dozens of text messages, each from an unknown number, flooded my screen, a digital assault. Some adopted the guise of concerned classmates. "Hey, is everything okay? People are saying crazy stuff about your family. Hope you're all right." Others were far more direct, their words cutting deep. "Your parents are devastated. How could you invent such vile falsehoods? Your mother cries incessantly because of your actions. How can you betray your own family like this?" I knew, with a sickening certainty, who the puppet master was. My brother, with his uncanny ability to manipulate minds and weave intricate webs of allegiance, was orchestrating this cruel campaign. The mental image of him, comfortably ensconced somewhere, pulling these strings, a malevolent conductor of a hateful symphony, made my stomach clench with nausea, a bitter taste rising in my throat. The next day, Mrs. Jackson, her face a mask of quiet resolve, took me to a phone store. The space was bright, almost clinically sterile, its fluorescent lights humming softly, casting everything in an unforgiving glow. Salespeople, moving with practiced efficiency, navigated the rows of gleaming devices, their movements precise as they helped us sever the digital umbilical cord to the harassment, offering a fragile hope of disconnection. It was a small act, but it felt like a monumental step towards reclaiming a sliver of peace. 2 months into my stay with the Jacksons, a period that had begun to feel like a fragile, blossoming sanctuary, Miss Wilson arrived, bearing news. She sat at the kitchen table, her omnipresent manila folder open before her, its contents a silent testament to a troubled history. She informed me that my parents had been diligently attending their court-mandated parenting classes and therapy sessions. Now, they were petitioning the court for supervised visitation. My hands, resting on the cool surface of the table, instantly turned to ice. My voice, barely a whisper, betrayed the rising tide of fear. Do I have to see them? The mere thought of occupying the same breathing space as them again, of enduring their presence, made my stomach violently clench, a knot of dread tightening in my gut. But Miss Wilson, a picture of calm authority, firmly reassured me. The judge, she explained, had been unequivocally clear. Any contact had to be entirely voluntary on my part. If I wasn't ready, if my heart wasn't in it, I didn't have to see them. Her voice, steady and certain, was a soothing balm to my frayed nerves. "This is about what's genuinely best for you, dear, not for them," she reiterated, her fingers briefly, comfortingly, squeezing my hand. A profound wave of relief washed over me, a warm, expansive sensation that momentarily eclipsed all else. Yet, as quickly as it arrived, it was shadowed by a familiar, insidious companion, guilt. That relentless, whispering voice in my head, a relic of years of manipulation, began its insidious refrain. "You're being selfish. You should forgive them. Family is everything. But Dr. Rivera, my therapist, with her gentle wisdom and unwavering support, had been a bulwark against such self-recrimination. She assured me, with profound empathy, that my feelings were not only normal but utterly valid, that healing was a complex, meandering journey, rarely linear, and that I owed my abusers nothing, absolutely nothing, not even the balm of forgiveness. Healing is your journey, she had reminded me during our next session, her gaze steady and reassuring. You, and only you, get to define what that looks like, how quickly or slowly it unfolds, and what destinations it reaches. Just a week later, as I was immersed in the quiet hum of the school library, my brother materialized. The chair opposite me scraped loudly, a jarring, aggressive sound against the polished floor as he yanked it out, its protest echoing through the hushed space. Several students, startled, glanced up, their eyes quickly darting away, sensing the sudden tension. He leaned back, an unnervingly casual air about him, as if we were merely discussing the weather, and remarked, "You know, you look absolutely terrible. We, on the other hand, are doing just great. The house is so wonderfully peaceful without you causing all those problems." His voice was a calm, almost conversational veneer over words laced with pure venom. My hands, suddenly clumsy with a rising tide of anxiety, fumbled with my textbooks. They felt impossibly heavy in my arms as I began to gather them, my mind already racing, plotting an escape, preparing to find a teacher, and report yet another blatant violation of the restraining order. But he continued, his voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial murmur that was somehow more chilling than his earlier outburst. "They won't believe you forever, you know," he purred, his words a corrosive acid. "Eventually, everyone will see what I've always seen. That you're the problem, just making up stories for attention." His eyes, fixed on mine, were devoid of warmth, cold and calculating, like chips of ice. "Just leave me alone," I managed to say, my voice, to my own surprise, far steadier than the tremor that racked my insides. He leaned closer, invading my personal space, his breath smelling faintly of coffee, a cloying, unwelcome presence. "And what are you going to do?" he challenged, a sneer twisting his lips. "Tell on me again. I'm just a concerned brother, checking on his sibling." Who do you think they'll believe? His words were a barbed hook, digging into my deepest fears. Just then, a library assistant, her sensible shoes making a soft, reassuring squeak on the polished linoleum, approached our table. "Is everything all right here?" she asked, her gaze flicking between us. In an instant, his face underwent a remarkable transformation. The cold malice vanished, replaced by an expression of genuine, almost saccharine concern. "Oh, yes, absolutely fine," he said, his voice smooth and affable, a perfect performance. "I was just trying to make sure my sister was doing okay, you know, family stuff. But I was just leaving anyway." The act was flawless, honed by years of practice, utterly convincing to an outsider. As he stood, he paused, leaning in one last time to whisper, his voice barely audible, a chilling promise meant only for my ears. "They're going to get you back. We're just playing along with this therapy nonsense, pretending, until the court gives us custody again." The threat hung unfinished between us, a toxic plume in the air, as he walked away. His shoulders relaxed, the very picture of a normal, carefree teenager, his casual departure a stark contrast to the poison he just delivered. I immediately reported the encounter, first to the school administration, then to Miss Wilson. The school acted swiftly, reviewing the security footage, which unequivocally confirmed my brother's unauthorized entry into the building, a stark violation of protocol. In response, security measures were significantly beefed up. Staff were thoroughly briefed, ensuring everyone knew he was strictly forbidden from approaching me. The security guard at the front entrance, a stern-faced man with a watchful demeanor, began meticulously checking IDs, his eyes scanning each face with an almost surgical precision. But the damage, the insidious, psychological damage, was already done. His venomous words, like a malevolent echo, reverberated in my mind each night as I tried to sleep. The ceiling of my room at the Jacksons' house, usually a source of quiet comfort, transformed into a stark movie screen for my darkest, most terrifying fears. What if he was right? What if were my parents merely feigning a transformation? Was this new, fragile piece just a temporary reprieve before I was inevitably forced to return to that life? These unsettling questions didn't just linger. They swirled and dove, relentless as vultures, tearing at the edges of the safety I had only recently begun to build. In our sessions, Dr. Rivera became my anchor, guiding me through the tumultuous waters of these anxieties. She meticulously explained that my brother's insidious attempts to control me through fear were a classic maneuver, a common, chilling tactic employed by abusers and those who enable their harmful patterns. "He's trying to drag you back into their reality," she elucidated, her voice calm yet firm. "Because your burgeoning freedom, your very ability to envision a different future, poses an existential threat to the carefully constructed, suffocating system they've always used to dominate and manipulate you." When I voiced my deepest, most primal fear, the terrifying possibility of the court actually sending me back, she gently but emphatically assured me that the entire judicial system had my best interests unequivocally at heart. She made me understand that I wasn't facing this alone. A formidable team of advocates was now fiercely battling on my behalf. This dedicated alliance included herself, the unwavering support of the Jacksons, the meticulous guidance of Miss Wilson, and even my understanding teachers. "You are not alone anymore," she reiterated, her words a balm to my raw nerves. Her office, with its soft lighting and hushed tones, truly felt like a sanctuary, an inviolable bubble where truth wasn't just spoken, but honored, protected, and given the space to breathe. A part of me, weary and hopeful, desperately wanted to believe her. And on some brighter days, against the persistent current of doubt, I actually did. The Jacksons' home, with its comforting rhythm of quiet routines, the palpable respect for personal space, and the clearly defined, reassuring boundaries, felt like living, breathing proof that alternative forms of family, truly supportive and nurturing ones, genuinely existed. It was a stark contrast to the chaotic, fear-driven environment I'd known. Yet, on other, darker days, that old, familiar dread would insidiously creep back in, a cold whisper at the back of my mind. It hissed that this newfound tranquility was a mirage, a fragile illusion, and that I was destined to eventually find myself back in that house, the one saturated with the taste of rice forced down my throat, the sting of the belt on my skin, and the suffocating pressure of coerced confessions. The fear, an insidious, physical presence, would tighten its icy grip around my chest like a relentless vice, squeezing the air from my lungs until breathing became a desperate, conscious effort. Barely 3 months after I had found placement with the Jacksons, my parents, feeling their grip loosening, drastically escalated their relentless campaign. They began to appear at school events, basketball games, choir concerts, anything that was open to the public, meticulously scanning the crowds, hoping to catch even a fleeting glimpse of me. I would see the gymnasium lights glinting off my mother's elaborate earrings as she sat conspicuously in the bleachers, her eyes, like predatory searchlights, systematically sweeping the faces in the stands for mine. They consistently maintained just enough distance to skirt the letter of the restraining order, yet remained agonizingly close enough for me to feel their intrusive presence, a chilling, invisible tether. Their spectral attendance invariably cast a long, oppressive shadow over events that should have been filled with the simple, unburdened joy of youth. Beyond their physical appearances, they embarked on a more insidious whisper campaign within the community, a subtle yet devastating assault on my reputation. Parents of my classmates, often armed with thinly veiled judgment or misplaced pity, would approach me in the sterile aisles of grocery stores or at other school functions. They would offer unsolicited narratives about how my parents were such good people, how they were praying for our family to be reunited, or how children sometimes misinterpret strict parenting as abuse. One particular mother cornered me in the cereal aisle, her voice dripping with saccharine concern, telling me, "They only want what's best for you." As I stood utterly frozen, my shopping cart, a flimsy and utterly inadequate barrier, positioned between us. My brother, however, chose a more direct, brutally effective approach. He would strategically corner my friends after school, his voice laced with a disturbingly convincing facade of concern, his eyes wide with feigned sincerity, as he spun elaborate, damaging tales. He claimed I had significant mental health issues, that I had always been the family troublemaker, and that I was callously tearing our family apart with lies. The impact was immediate and devastating. Some friends simply stopped speaking to me altogether. They would pointedly look away as I approached, suddenly engrossed in their lockers or their phones, masters of the art of avoidance. Others, less subtle, would ask uncomfortable, probing questions, their expressions a mix of confusion and suspicion. "Are you really making all this up?" A small, resilient handful stood by me, but the suffocating tendrils of isolation grew thicker with each passing day. Lunch tables that had once welcomed me with open spaces now seemed to magically fill up just seconds before I arrived, leaving me with nowhere to sit. One afternoon, returning home from school, I found Mrs. Jackson looking profoundly worried. The typically gentle lines around her eyes were noticeably deeper, etched with a new strain. Her usually warm smile was forced, stretched thin. She sat me down at the familiar kitchen table, its sturdy wooden surface suddenly feeling like the only solid thing in a world tilting on its axis. Gently, almost reluctantly, she informed me that my parents had filed a formal legal petition for reunification, brazenly asserting that they had meticulously completed all court requirements and, even more audaciously, that they had fundamentally changed. The wooden table felt reassuringly solid under my hands as I instinctively gripped its edge, a desperate attempt to ground myself. My stomach plummeted, a sickening lurch, as I heard a small, frightened voice that barely resembled my own ask, "Do I have to go back?" Mrs. Jackson, ever composed, quickly reassured me that I wouldn't have to return immediately. She carefully explained the process. There would be a formal hearing where I would have the crucial opportunity to speak directly and privately with the judge, and Miss Wilson would be there to present her comprehensive recommendations, advocating powerfully on my behalf. Her hand briefly covered mine, a fleeting touch, but its warmth and reassuring pressure offered a momentary anchor. That night, sleep was an elusive phantom. The mere thought of being dragged back to that house, to those arbitrary, suffocating rules, to that life, was utterly unbearable. I had only just begun to experience the sweet, unfamiliar taste of safety. I had only just started to believe, truly believe, that I deserved a better, more peaceful existence. The moonlight, usually a comforting glow, cast eerie, shifting shadows on my bedroom wall, morphing into menacing shapes that seemed to ride and mock me through the interminable hours of darkness. The hearing, a looming, terrifying milestone, was scheduled for the very next week. Ms. Wilson, with her characteristic thoroughness, became my unwavering guide, helping me prepare for the daunting hearing. We sat for what felt like endless hours in her office, meticulously reviewing what would happen, what questions the judge might ask, and how I could articulate my truth with clarity and conviction. We went over the details again and again until I felt, if not fully confident, then at least somewhat ready to face the ordeal. Dr. Rivera, understanding the immense pressure I was under, worked with me on specialized breathing techniques designed to help me maintain a semblance of calm while testifying. "In through your nose for 4 counts, hold for 7, out through your mouth for 8, she instructed, her voice a steady rhythm, demonstrating the precise cadence until I could mimic it. The day before the hearing, a fresh wave of terror washed over me. I discovered another chilling note in my locker, a cruel reminder of their omnipresence. "See you at home soon." The flimsy paper trembled violently in my hand, reflecting the seismic shift of fear erupting inside me. My hands shook so uncontrollably that my textbook slipped from my grasp, plummeting to the linoleum floor with a jarring crash. The echoing thud reverberated through the quiet hallway, drawing the very attention I desperately wanted to avoid. A passing teacher, Mr. Gaines, his usually jovial expression now concerned, noticed my distress and kindly helped me gather my scattered books and papers. His knees cracked audibly as he knelt down, a small, human detail in a moment of escalating fear. When I showed him the ominous note, his face visibly darkened as he read its chilling message. He immediately suggested we report it to the principal's office, unequivocally labeling it for what it was, harassment. The principal, upon hearing the details, promptly called Miss Wilson, who added the threatening note to her already thick file. They dutifully reviewed the school's security footage once again, but, as was becoming agonizingly predictable, found nothing conclusive. My brother, it seemed, had grown remarkably adept at eluding the camera's gaze, a phantom of manipulation. That night, sleep abandoned me entirely. I sat rigidly by my window, a silent sentinel, my gaze fixed on the quiet street below, half expecting, half dreading, to see my parents' car idling menacingly at the curb. The neighborhood was shrouded in a deep, almost suffocating stillness, most windows dark, reflecting the profound peace that eluded me. Around 2 a.m., as if on cue, a car did indeed drive by slowly, deliberately, its headlights eerily off. It circled the block twice, a silent, predatory loop before vanishing into the darkness. I couldn't discern who was driving, but my body knew. Every primal instinct screamed danger, a silent, guttural alarm blaring within me. My heart hammered against my ribs so forcefully that I could feel its frantic beat reverberating in my fingertips. The first hint of dawn saw me confiding in Mrs. Jackson. Her face, usually so composed, paled dramatically as I recounted the unsettling details of the car and its phantom driver. She immediately contacted the police, who took a formal report. But their concluding words offered little comfort. There isn't much we can do without concrete proof that it was your parents. The investigation, like so many others, hit a wall of plausible deniability, leaving me once again in a terrifying limbo. They had solemnly pledged to increase the frequency and visibility of police patrols within our quiet neighborhood. A hollow promise that felt more like a public relations maneuver than a genuine commitment to safety. The officer's radio, a static-laced conduit of clipped authority, crackled with a low, urgent energy as he relayed the request. His words punctuated by a flurry of cryptic codes and indecipherable language of law enforcement that whispered of a hidden world, passing back and forth in rapid, coded bursts I couldn't begin to unravel. Then, with an almost agonizing inevitability, the day of the hearing arrived. It dawned heavy with unspoken tension, casting a long shadow over the morning. For this momentous occasion, I wore the clothes Mrs. Jackson had lovingly bought me a simple, soft blouse and a pair of trousers that, for the first time in what felt like forever, actually fit properly, draping comfortably rather than clinging or pinching. This was a stark, almost painful contrast to the too small, threadbare outfits my parents had stellarly kept me in, garments that had long since grown too tight, too constricting. A constant physical reminder of their neglect. The fabric of these new clothes felt remarkably soft against my skin, a gentle caress instead of the familiar scratchiness or oppressive tightness that had become my daily norm. Yet, despite this newfound comfort, an internal tremor began, intensifying as we stepped through the imposing archway of the courthouse. My hands, cold and clammy, wouldn't stop trembling, betraying the turmoil churning within me. The building itself seemed to have grown even more formidable since my last visit, an architectural behemoth of cold, unforgiving stone and vast, echoing hallways that swallowed sound and amplified apprehension. It felt less like a place of justice and more like a fortress, designed to intimidate. My parents were already seated, a somber tableau beside their immaculately dressed lawyer. My mother's appearance shocked me. She had visibly lost weight, her cheekbones now sharp, almost predatory, making her eyes seem unnaturally large, like dark pools in her gaunt face. My father's hair, once predominantly dark, was now liberally streaked with more gray than I remembered, a stark testament to the purported stress of our separation. Both looked up the moment I entered, their faces meticulously arranged into expressions of profound parental concern and aching love of flawlessly executed performance. I knew. One rehearsed countless times in front of mirrors and perfected with the guidance of their therapists. Behind them, a silent, unsettling presence, sat my brother. His face was a carefully constructed mask, utterly unreadable, yet his eyes, those cold, calculating windows to his detached soul, followed my every movement as I walked to my designated seat. They were like a predator's gaze, devoid of warmth, dissecting me with chilling precision. Determined not to meet his challenging stare, I kept my gaze fixed forward, focusing instead on the highly polished, dark wood of the judge's bench, a smooth, silent barrier between me and the storm. Judge Winters, an older woman with a severe yet dignified demeanor, called the hearing to order, her voice resonating with quiet authority. The sharp, decisive rap of her gavel against the wood sent a jolt through me, causing me to flinch almost imperceptibly, a purely visceral reaction to the official start of my fate being decided. My parents' lawyer, a man whose presence filled the room, spoke first. His voice was a smooth, confident bomb, expertly modulated as he began to describe their extraordinary efforts to address the court's earlier concerns. His hands moved expressively, almost theatrically, as he skillfully painted a vivid picture of repentance and redemption. A narrative so compelling it might have convinced anyone unfamiliar with the grim reality. He detailed how my parents had not only completed various parenting classes, but had done so with glowing reviews, their certificates presumably framed like trophies. They had, he asserted, attended therapy sessions consistently, implying a deep commitment to introspection and growth. As a symbol of their renewed commitment, they had even, he proudly declared, renovated my bedroom, transforming it into a fresh, tart thought that, even now, sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. The very idea of them intruding upon and altering my most personal space without my presence, without my input, made my skin crawl with an almost unbearable revulsion. To bolster their image further, they had, he continued, joined a church support group specifically for parents in distress. Their therapist, a soft-spoken woman, then took the stand testifying that my parents had indeed gained significant insight into appropriate boundaries and effective discipline techniques. Her words were carefully chosen, designed to convey profound psychological change. Their parenting class instructor, a cheerful woman, echoed this sentiment, describing them as eager to learn and implement positive parenting strategies. Each testimony, meticulously crafted and delivered, built upon the last, constructing an elaborate facade, an image of changed people that I simply did not recognize, nor for a single second did I believe. How could such a carefully choreographed performance erase years of deeply embedded pain and trauma? Then it was our side's turn, a stark shift in narrative and tone. Ms. Wilson, my advocate, presented her report with unwavering conviction, her voice clear and professional, devoid of the theatrical flourishes of the opposing counsel. She systematically expressed her profound concerns that my parents' purported changes were, at best, superficial, motivated solely by an insatiable desire to regain custody rather than a genuine, heartfelt understanding of the deep and lasting harm they had inflicted. She then proceeded to detail incident after chilling incident, the relentless and continued harassment I had endured, despite the court-issued restraining order that should have protected me. Her voice, calm and steady, listed the aggressions like a prosecutor building a case, leaving no room for doubt about the ongoing threat. Following her, Dr. Rivera, my therapist, took the stand. Her testimony was clinically precise, yet deeply empathetic, as she explained my ongoing trauma symptoms and the potentially devastating negative impact that a forced reunification could have on my already fragile mental health. She employed precise, clinical terms like post-traumatic stress and attachment disruption, lending powerful, irrefutable clinical weight to the chaotic, terrifying experiences I had been silently enduring for so long. It was validating, in a way, to hear my inner turmoil articulated with such professional clarity. The school counselor, Miss Patel, then offered her insights, highlighting my remarkably improved academic performance and significantly more stable emotional state since being thoughtfully placed with the Jacksons. She's not just coping, Miss Patel stated, her voice brimming with a quiet pride. She's truly beginning to thrive in an environment where she finally feels genuinely safe, truly seen. Throughout all these testimonies, the chilling awareness of my brother's presence never left me. I could feel his eyes, cold and calculating, boring into my back, a constant, oppressive weight that seemed to drain the air from the room. When it was his turn to speak, he strode confidently to the stand, a picture of aggrieved innocence. He painted a damning portrait of me, a troubled sibling who had, he claimed, always sought attention through a twisted web of lies and manipulative tactics. He described our family life as idyllically normal and loving, a sickening distortion of the truth. He even went so far as to claim I had always been intensely jealous of his supposedly perfect relationship with our parents. His voice, a carefully calibrated instrument of deception, broke at precisely the right moments, his eyes shining with what looked, to the untrained observer, like genuine, heartbroken emotion. He concluded his masterful performance by asserting, they just wanted their family back together, his voice cracking with a perfectly timed, seemingly raw emotion. They miss me so much. We just want our sister back, he choked out, and then, as if on cue, a single, perfect tear, like a tiny diamond, slid majestically down his cheek. The entire performance was a breathtaking display of manipulative artistry, chilling in its perfection. Finally, the moment I had dreaded and longed for arrived. It was my turn to speak. Judge Winters, sensing the profound gravity of the situation, extended a compassionate invitation for me to speak with her privately in her chambers. As I began to stand and follow her, my brother's eyes, those cold, predatory eyes, locked onto mine. His lips moved almost imperceptibly, forming a single, venomous word that looked unmistakably like liar. That silent accusation, heavy and suffocating, hung in the charged air between us, a final, poisoned arrow, as I turned and walked away. In the judge's chambers, a room significantly smaller and far more intimate than the cavernous courtroom, I began to tell her everything. The atmosphere was softer, less adversarial, almost comforting. A framed family photo sat on her polished desk, children and grandchildren, all smiling serenely in a sunlit park, a stark and gentle contrast to the darkness I was about to unveil. With a newfound strength, I recounted the unspeakable cruelties, the agonizing ordeal of kneeling on uncooked rice, the brutal sting of the belt, the invasive room searches, the terror of forced confessions for transgressions I hadn't committed, the soul-crushing isolation of eating alone at the cold kitchen counter while my family dined together, laughing and oblivious. I spoke of the 3 horrifying days without food, a punishment designed to break my spirit. And with a tremor in my voice that quickly solidified into resolve, I detailed my brother's insidious role in it all, the quiet encouragement he gave their cruelty. His smirk a constant presence in my darkest memories. The words, once so difficult to form, now came easier, flowing with an almost practiced ease, each retelling making the raw pain slightly less agonizing. When Judge Winters gently inquired about my life with the Jacksons, a warmth spread through me. I told her, simply and truthfully, that they were profoundly different. They treated me not as a burden or a possession, but as a person, a unique individual with inherent worth. They consistently knocked before entering my room, respecting my privacy. They never, not once, searched my belongings, honoring my personal space. And crucially, they never punished me for the unspoken privacy of my own thoughts or feelings. I feel safe there, I confessed, the truth of that profound statement settling in my chest like a warm, comforting stone, solid and undeniable. But when she asked the harrowing question, what would happen if I were forced to return to my parents' home, the carefully constructed dam within me finally broke. I couldn't stop the tears that welled up hot and overwhelming, as I whispered, my voice thick with desperate pleading, begging her, imploring her, not to send me back. They haven't changed, I sobbed, they're just pretending. My voice, already cracking, fractured completely as I articulated my deepest fear. They'll be worse, they'll punish me for telling. They'll never let me be alone again. The words were ragged, raw, torn from a place of primal terror. When we eventually returned to the courtroom, the air crackling with unspoken expectation, Judge Winters thanked everyone for their testimony. Her gaze swept over the assembled faces, betraying nothing. She then announced, her voice calm and authoritative, that she would meticulously review all the presented evidence and issue her ruling the following week. The entire courtroom seemed to collectively hold its breath as she spoke, the silence profound, expectant. As we exited the courthouse, stepping back into the harsh light of the real world, my mother's voice, strained and theatrical, suddenly pierced the quiet. We love you. We just want you home. She cried out, her words echoing eerily in the vast, marble hallway, a performance for the benefit of anyone within earshot. I didn't look back. I simply couldn't. The sunlight outside, after the dim, cavernous courthouse, was blindingly bright, momentarily disorienting me, a painful metaphor for the uncertain future. The week that followed was, without a doubt, the longest and most agonizing of my entire life. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the old Jackson house, usually comforting sounds of domesticity, seemed amplified, each one potentially a threatening harbinger of doom. My nerves were constantly frayed, stretched thin, and taut like guitar strings. I found myself repeatedly checking the locks on doors and windows, tugging on doorknobs with frantic insistence to ensure they were absolutely secure, a ritual born of profound anxiety. Sleep offered no true escape. I was plagued by vivid, terrifying nightmares of being forcibly dragged back to that house, of kneeling on sharp, uncooked rice, my knees burning with agony. While my brother watched from the shadows, a cruel, satisfied smirk twisting his lips. I would wake gasping, my heart hammering against my ribs, the bedsheets tangled tightly around my legs like inescapable restraints, trapping me in a terrifying echo of my past. Then, on the very night before the judge was set to deliver her ruling, a horrifying escalation shattered my fragile peace. A rock, wrapped in a menacing note, smashed through my bedroom window at the Jacksons' house, the sudden crash of violent punctuation to my nightmares. The message, scrawled in crude, threatening letters, was chillingly incomplete, a sinister promise of retribution. Traitors deserve what? They get the sudden, violent crash of splintering glass tore me from the depths of sleep, an abrupt, terrifying awakening. Jagged shards, like scattered diamonds, lay strewn across the polished wood of my bedroom floor, each piece catching and reflecting the pale, ethereal glow of the moonlight, making them glitter menacingly. Soon after, the police arrived, their flashing blue lights painting transient patterns across the house's exterior. They moved with a practiced, methodical efficiency, photographing the damage from every conceivable angle, meticulously dusting for fingerprints yet, despite their diligent efforts. They found nothing concrete, nothing conclusive that could point to an assailant. Their radios, clipped to their uniforms, emitted low, intermittent crackles as they navigated the silent house, their voices hushed and resolutely professional. A stark contrast to the chaos that had just erupted. Mr. and Mrs. Jackson, ever vigilant and caring, promptly relocated me to their grown son's old room for the night, a sanctuary purposefully chosen to distance me from the gaping maw of the broken window, which felt like a wound in the very fabric of the house. The air in the room, though comforting, carried the faint, lingering scent of aftershave mingled with the dusty fragrance of old books, tangible, almost nostalgic. Remnants of a son who had long since moved on, but whose presence still subtly permeated the space. Downstairs, I knew they were taking shifts, silently watching over the house, their dedication a palpable presence. I distinctly heard their soft footsteps, the almost imperceptible creaks of floorboards underfoot, and the occasional, hushed murmur of conversation, a comforting but distant reassurance. Lying rigid in the unfamiliar bed, every creak and groan from the aged timbers of the house was magnified, transformed into a potential harbinger of danger, each sound fueling my spiraling anxiety. Was this, I couldn't help but wonder, truly my last night of innocent safety, or merely another terrifying prelude to something far worse? The unfamiliar ceiling above me, stark and unadorned, morphed into a vast, terrifying screen upon which my worst, most vivid fears played out in relentless, harrowing succession. The following morning, a pallid, overcast sky reflected the somber mood as we made our way back to the courthouse. The monolithic building itself seemed to loom even more oppressively against the gray expanse, an architectural embodiment of imposing authority and definitive judgment. It felt like a final arbiter, a place where destinies were irrevocably sealed. Inside the courtroom, my parents and brother occupied the exact same seats as our previous visit, yet the atmosphere was palpably altered, charged with an unsettling undercurrent. My mother's typically confident smile, usually a mask of unwavering resolve, had completely vanished, replaced by a strained, almost brittle expression. My father, usually composed, now appeared visibly tense, his shoulders hunched, his jaw tight. My brother, usually quick with a taunt or a defiant glare, steadfastly refused to meet my gaze, his eyes darting evasively away whenever I tried to catch them. The very air in the courtroom felt dense, almost suffocating, thick with a collective, anxious anticipation that pressed down on everyone present. Judge Winters, a figure of formidable gravitas, finally entered, her black robe flowing around her as she ascended to the bench, and with a sharp, authoritative rap of her gavel, she called the court to order. The abrupt, resonant thud of the gavel made me involuntarily flinch, a sudden tremor running through me. She then proceeded to shuffle a few papers on her desk, the rustling sound piercing the newfound silence, before raising her gaze. Her expression was now unequivocally serious, her eyes sweeping across the room as she formally announced that after meticulous and careful consideration of all the testimony presented, every piece of evidence meticulously laid out, she had finally reached her decision regarding the highly contentious petition for family reunification. The room, as if on cue, dissolved into an absolute, breathless silence. The only discernible sound was the relentless, rhythmic ticking of the large wall clock, each deliberate second-hand movement feeling like an eternity, marking the excruciating passage of uncertainty. I found myself unconsciously holding my breath, my entire future, my very sense of safety and belonging, suspended precariously, utterly dependent on her impending words. Underneath the heavy oak table, Mrs. Jackson's reassuring hand quietly found mine, her fingers interlacing with mine, offering a gentle but firm squeeze, a silent gesture of unwavering support that anchored me. Then, cutting through the thick silence, Judge Winters' voice rang out, firm, clear, and utterly resolute. As she formally announced her decision, she was denying the petition for family reunification at this time. For a fleeting, disorienting moment, the gravity of those words simply refused to fully penetrate, to truly register in my stunned mind. But when they finally did, the effect was profound, an overwhelming, almost suffocating wave of pure, unadulterated relief surged through every fiber of my being so intensely that I felt dizzy, lightheaded, as if all the oxygen had suddenly been siphoned from the room. My legs, suddenly weak and insubstantial, threatened to buckle beneath me, threatening to give out completely. Mrs. Jackson, ever watchful, immediately steadied me, her gentle, reassuring hand finding its place on my shoulder, anchoring me back to reality. Across the courtroom, the scene unfolding on my family's faces was stark and immediate. My mother's face, usually so carefully composed, visibly crumpled, her features dissolving into an expression of raw and varnished despair. My father, typically a tempest of barely contained rage, sat eerily, perfectly still, his body rigid and unmoving. Yet, his jaw was clenched so tightly that I could distinctly see the muscle near his ear twitching uncontrollably, a telltale sign of his barely suppressed fury. My brother's eyes, wide and disbelieving, betrayed a genuine, profound shock. For once, strikingly, he wasn't merely putting on an act, performing for an audience. The surprise etched on his face was undeniably, terrifyingly real. Judge Winters, maintaining her composed demeanor, proceeded to elaborate, extending my current placement for a minimum of 6 additional months. This extension, she stressed, would be accompanied by mandatory continued therapy for all parties involved, a crucial prerequisite before any notion of reunification could even be reconsidered. She then meticulously detailed her reasoning, building her argument brick by painful brick. She cited the continued harassment I had endured, shockingly persistent despite the existing restraining order, the ongoing trauma symptoms that visibly affected me, and the escalating series of suspicious incidents, explicitly mentioning the unsettling event of the rock being thrown through the window. Her voice remained perfectly measured, deeply authoritative, as she systematically listed each and every factor that had weighed heavily upon her decision, each word a hammer blow to their hopes. As her pronouncements continued, I watched my father's expression darken progressively, like a storm cloud gathering. My mother, no longer able to hold back, began dabbing frantically at her eyes with a crumpled tissue, her slender shoulders shaking uncontrollably with silent, gut-wrenching sobs. Their lawyer, a figure of polished professionalism, leaned over, whispering something urgent into my father's ear, a hushed counsel that clearly agitated him, causing him to shake his head sharply, vehemently rejecting whatever advice was offered. Judge Winters finally concluded her lengthy, intricate deliberation by unequivocally stating that the court, as an institution, takes the paramount safety and holistic well-being of children with the utmost seriousness. It is, she emphasized, their core mandate. While she acknowledged that reunification, in an ideal world, would always remain the ultimate, aspirational goal, she firmly asserted that such an outcome would only ever be permitted when it genuinely, truly served the indisputable best interests of the child. With that final, resonant declaration, the gavel came down for the last time, a sharp, emphatic crack that reverberated with chilling finality throughout the high-ceilinged room. The 6 tumultuous months that followed the court's decision proved to be an utterly strange, disorienting mix of profound, initial relief and an unrelenting, exhausting need for constant vigilance. The harassment, far from ceasing, merely mutated, shedding its old skin for new, more insidious forms. My parents, for instance, began regularly attending the exact same church as the Jacksons. Every Sunday, without fail, they would occupy a pew just a few rows directly behind us, their presence a suffocating, almost physical weight, until the Jacksons, seeking respite, were forced to switch to a different service time. The familiar hymns and comforting prayers remained the same, yet their invasive presence irrevocably transformed the sacred sanctuary, a place meant for peace, into an unnerving, psychological battleground. Beyond church, they strategically appeared at my school functions, at community events, indeed, anywhere they might legally manage to catch even a fleeting glimpse of me. They were always meticulously careful to maintain the precise, legally mandated distance, yet their unblinking, unwavering gaze was always there, always watching, a chilling, ever-present reminder. Their relentless persistence, a grim testament to their refusal to yield, was utterly exhausting, a draining, constant reminder that they had not, and seemingly would not, give up. My brother, however, opted for a far more direct, confrontational approach. Despite the restraining order specifically prohibiting contact, he ingeniously found countless insidious ways to make his presence and his animosity undeniably known. More unsettling notes, scrawled with his familiar hand, inexplicably appeared inside my locker, breaching what should have been a safe, private space. Anonymous social media accounts, clearly linked to him, began bombarding me with messages that skillfully ranged from guilt-laden accusations to thinly veiled threats. "You're breaking Mom's heart," one might read, a barb aimed squarely at my emotional core. "Dad's not sleeping because of you," another would lament, attempting to sow seeds of responsibility for their distress. "This won't last forever," a third would ominously warn, carrying an undercurrent of future retribution. Each message, meticulously crafted, was a calculated attempt to psychologically pull me back into their orbit, to make me doubt the crucial decision I had made to speak up, to seek safety. Simultaneously, a pervasive network of malicious rumors began to spread like wildfire through the school, painting me as mentally unstable, fabricating stories that I had supposedly made everything up for attention. Students who had never once exchanged a single word with me suddenly developed elaborate, fictionalized narratives about my weird behavior or lies I had supposedly spun. These whispers, insidious and corrosive, followed me everywhere through the crowded hallways, across the cacophonous cafeterias, even into the supposed quiet of the classrooms. Some days, the relentless barrage of their narratives became so overwhelming, so disorienting, that it became genuinely difficult to discern what was truly real and what was merely a cruel, fabricated lie. 3 months after the pivotal court hearing, a period during which the emotional wounds had barely begun to scab over, I found myself walking home late one afternoon from an intense study session at the library. The street, typically bustling, was eerily quiet, almost deserted, bathed in the soft, fading light of dusk. Suddenly, with an almost predatory grace, a car smoothly pulled up alongside me, its engine emitting a low, almost imperceptible hum as it effortlessly matched my walking pace. My heart instantly hammered against my ribs, a primal alarm blaring in my mind. Then, the passenger window glided down, revealing my brother's infuriated face. He leaned out, his voice cutting sharply through the still air of the quiet neighborhood, loaded with a chilling blend of defiance and possessiveness. They would never stop, he declared, his words ringing with a sinister certainty. I was still their kid, he insisted, as if ownership was a truth that transcended legal decrees. And perhaps most chillingly, he vowed that they would fight for me forever. His pronouncements, laced with an unsettling blend of anger and perverse affection, hung in the air. A dark promise that echoed ominously in the deepening twilight. I kept walking, eyes fixed straight ahead, fingers already moving with an almost desperate urgency, dialing Ms. Wilson's number on my phone. The sidewalk stretched out before me, and seemingly endless ribbon of concrete. Each step I forced myself to take felt like an enormous, monumental effort. A physical manifestation of the invisible weight pressing down on my chest. He continued, his voice a low, insidious rumble from the car that had been relentlessly creeping alongside me. His words were a chilling echo of past traumas, a fresh layer of fear slithering into my consciousness. I thought I'd won, he sneered, but hadn't. And this, he gestured vaguely at my retreating figure, was just making them more determined. He issued a grim warning, a veiled promise of escalating terror. When I came home, he insisted, with a chilling certainty that it would eventually happen. It would be so much worse. The threat hung palpably in the humid air between us, a heavy, suffocating weight, pregnant with the promise of future suffering. Just as my breath hitched in my throat, a distant siren grew louder, and a police cruiser turned onto the street a block away. In an instant, the car carrying my brother and the weight of his malevolent presence saluted sharply, tires squealing in a brief, desperate protest against the asphalt as it sped away into the urban maze. I recounted the incident to Miss Wilson, my voice trembling ever so slightly despite my best efforts to sound composed. She listened with her usual calm professionalism, making meticulous notes and adding it to what was now a substantial, growing fully a disheartening testament to the relentless harassment. The restraining order, a mere legal formality, was extended, but we both knew, with a shared, unspoken understanding, that it was little more than a flimsy piece of paper. It offered a facade of protection, but in reality, it couldn't possibly stop them if their malevolent determination truly set in. During our next session, Dr. Rivera offered a profound, unsettling insight into their behavior. She explained, with a quiet intensity, that they were escalating their tactics precisely because they were losing control. Each passing day I spent away from them, growing stronger, more resilient, and undeniably more independent, represented a direct, undeniable threat to the absolute power they had once wielded over me. Your freedom, she articulated, leaning forward in her chair, her gaze unwavering, is what scares them most. It unravels the very fabric of their control. I finally voiced the raw, terrifying question that had been haunting my waking hours and invading my restless nights. Would they ever truly stop? Would I be condemned to spend my entire life constantly looking over my shoulder, forever anticipating the next veiled threat, the next unwelcome appearance? Dr. Rivera, sensing the depth of my apprehension, leaned forward, her expression softening with empathy, and acknowledged that it was indeed a valid, profoundly human fear. But then, her voice firm yet gentle, she reminded me of a crucial truth. I now had options, avenues of escape and defense that simply hadn't existed before. I had a robust network of support, and, perhaps most importantly, I had people who genuinely believed me, who saw my truth rather than their distorted narrative. That night, as I sat with the Jacksons at their dinner table, the air in the dining room warm and comforting, perfumed with the rich aroma of roast chicken and aromatic herbs, I found myself absently pushing food around my plate. Every fiber of my being was focused on gathering the immense courage required to finally articulate the question that had been silently festering, haunting me for weeks, growing larger and more unbearable with each passing day. The words, once trapped, finally blurted out, a desperate, almost uncontrolled flood. What would happen when I turned 18? Would I, despite everything, be forced to go back to them? Mrs. Jackson, her movements calm and deliberate, set down her fork. Her gaze met mine, filled with an unwavering certainty that immediately began to soothe the storm within me. She assured me, her voice firm and resolute, brooking no possibility of argument, that I absolutely, unequivocally would not have to go back. When I turned 18, she explained, I would finally possess the legal autonomy to make my own decisions about where I lived, about the people I chose to have in my life, about my very future. My voice, when I next spoke, sounded small and reedy even to my own ears, almost swallowed by the quiet hum of the comfortable room. But where would I go, mister? Jackson cleared his throat, a thoughtful, considered sound, and explained that they'd actually been meaning to talk to me about that. He then laid out an offer so generous, so unexpected, that it took my breath away. If I wanted, and he emphasized only if I wanted, they would genuinely love for me to stay with them, even after I turned 18, through college if that was my plan, or whatever path unfolded for me next. I simply stared at them, my mind struggling to fully process the magnitude of what I was hearing. You really want me to stay? I managed to stammer out the question, though composed of only 5 simple words, felt enormous. A stark revelation of all my deepest insecurities laid bare. Mrs. Jackson, without hesitation, reached across the table and enveloped my hand in hers. Her grip was warm and solid, a reassuring anchor in what had for so long felt like a stormy, chaotic sea. She assured me, with the utmost sincerity, that of course they did, adding, you're part of our family now. The word family hit me with the force of a physical blow, reverberating through my very core. For such an agonizingly long time, that word had been synonymous with fear, with an endurable pain, with the exhausting, constant need to walk on fragile eggshells. The utterly revolutionary idea that it could, in fact, signify safety, profound respect, and a genuine, unconditional career was almost too much for my beleaguered mind to comprehend. Tears welled in my eyes, blurring my vision as I looked at these 2 extraordinary people who had, through their unwavering kindness, shown me what family should actually feel like. The profound realization settled over me then, gently, warmly, like a comforting blanket after a long, cold journey. I wasn't alone anymore. And maybe, just maybe, I never would be again.